Welcome to the Hawks Nest live stream show. My name is Brandon Kane, and I do appreciate you for tuning on in today. A lovely Sunday afternoon, albeit it is lovely when it's not football season and you're just beginning into the beginnings of the offseason. I don't know as much, maybe a little bit, but not as much. I thank you guys for watching today, and we're going to have a show a little bit centered around our general manager and some of his recent thoughts on a radio appearance. He's not a guy that speaks a lot. You get him on these appearances on 710. It sounds like he's going to do a couple of them back to back here, but you get that, you get the combine, you get maybe a little bit in training camp. Pretty quiet is John. He stays out of the camera's eye, the microphone, and all that. So when he does speak, I always say it is a good idea to listen to what he's got to say. Now, a lot of times when these general managers do speak and talk, they don't always give you a lot to go off of. They're going to hide and just kind of give you much like coach speak, general managers speak, where they're not giving you a lot of insights. I actually do think, though, that in this recent interview, there were some interesting things John spoke about that I think we can take away from this. And that's why I wanted to kind of cover these clips with you guys today. I've got about 10 of them parsed out here from the interview with 710. And I want to discuss a few of these with you guys because I do think, again, it gives us a bit of a guidance and a direction for this offseason. And spoiler factor on it, I think at the last couple of cuts are not necessarily going to make many of you happy on what he has to say on that. And that's where I think there's going to be some good opening for us to have some productive discussion when it comes to some of his thoughts on this. So let's go to the first one out the gate here, which is John just speaking to a little bit on the current situation with how long it took to get Clint Kubiak here in-house, why it took so long, why it was so exhaustive, and here's some of his thoughts on that one.
Man, this seems really deliberate. I hope they don't lose their guy.
Yeah, no, it was deliberate. I mean, Mike did a great job of really thinking through his process. It's a very important hire. Last year Mike was the second to last hire. So quite honestly, the pool's just different at that time, right? So You don't have the same a number of coaches that are available, and so to be able to walk into this process at the time we did, at the end of the season and like knowing exactly what he was looking for, but then talking to the different people and trying to envision, what his work day is going to look like, what, the philosophy is, and, who they want to hire on their staff, all that kind of stuff. So it's a process, and I was just really impressed with his ability to know exactly what he wanted.
What I like about this is, number one, we know that Mike McDonald is there really as much as anything kind of running this alongside Schneider. Yes, this would be what you would like to see happen, but there is dysfunction in other organizations where the general manager is more going to say, I'll give you what you're going to have on your staff, especially for a young head coach. So good to hear that Mike is seeking this out. He's picking the guy that, he really wants. He's got a real clear vision for what he wants to do. And I think John touched on some very important parts of this hiring process that I think that we saw the fruits of last year with Mike McDonald, being that when you are this exhaustive and you are considering A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and all the way down the line of items that intersect when it comes to a coach, you're looking at all those things and considering all those things. It's not just about what my people have in their mind, where you bring a guy in on the first interview or you have him on the phone and it goes well on a Zoom call. Then you have him in and it's like, wow, we've got good chemistry. We're going with it. And you go, okay, that's all we need. We're going to hire you off that. As opposed to like, how's your staff? What's your work? How do you work? What is the process like? How's that going to, intermix here with our coach? Where you really got to go beyond just the simple on this and try to be as they are, exhausted with it. So I think just confirms this wasn't about them being desperate or being left with leftovers. As he said, they had a much better chance to pick a better contingent of coaches this year at the start, as opposed to last year when the process was a little bit late. And I think this is much of something that we kind of already knew, but it just was able to confirm that, which was good to hear. On the next cut we've got here, this is a quick one, but this is one that's going to kind of be in regards to a little bit of what John's going to talk about in regards to the offensive line. And this is a clip that I want you to just hear what he's got to say on this and take it away as more of, I'm going to connect this to something I'm going to talk about here a little bit later on in regards to that offensive line. But just listen to the way he kind of speaks on this, because I think this is an interesting cut too.
So we're on this constant quest to have this amazing marriage with, coaching, player development, acquisition, sports science. How can we meld all these things together?
It's a quick little cut, but when we start to wonder a little bit why, we're going to talk later on about why John has a little bit of a thinking of, you don't go on the free agent market, let's say, to go get linemen or whatnot, or where, we have not developed as well in-house as we need to. And it really comes down to that's the failing. Less maybe even more so from John's standpoint of feeling like they didn't get the right talent. But I think that he would push back a little bit more onto some of that and thinking that with some of these extra things that they do, all those items he mentioned, sports, science, and on down the line, that it does give them this advantage to get this to the place it needs to be, as opposed to maybe how we think of it more linearly, being, there's a Trey Smith out there on the open market, or there's a Tevin Jenkins out there on the open market, or a Drew Dahlman, and this guy's can, help you out significantly what you have. And no, we just need to develop and draft better. I think that this is a little bit of an insight into that. And he says, we interconnect all this. We're going to be great in all of these things and how we aspire to be. I don't know if they've reached that point in all these things, but we're going to aspire to get to that spot with these things. And when they interconnect with how we draft, that will give us that player, as opposed to looking out there a little bit more to the open market, as he'll speak about here in just a second. Third cut is going to be in regards to talking about the acquisition of Ernest Jones, a little bit also on giving us some insight into where exactly they're at right now with the negotiations to a small degree.
But Ernest was a great acquisition at that time because he's just this, strong, like natural leader, and then obviously he's instinctive. We can go through all the physical stuff, right? Yeah. But just a really good player. Obviously, we want Ernest back. We've talked to his guys. We've had great communication with them, and we're hoping we're able to accomplish that. Some guys, at some point you can get too close to the end of the season where they want to see what free agency looks like. So now they can go out and see what their market is, and understandably so.
The inside linebacker market is a really tough one for those guys. Some are getting a little bit more paid. Others, it's harder to get it done. And with a guy like Ernest Jones, who is a really good player, but may have some slight little holes to the game, especially in coverage here and there a little bit, it's harder to maybe get as much of that determined value on point, especially for a guy who, from his consideration, feels like he's probably a year overdue from being paid. And so this is one where it will probably get down to the 25th hour with him. You hear John saying he was a good addition at the time. A little bit of a hedge there in what he's saying, I think. And I would expect them to still try to get negotiations done here. But I do think this also is a little bit of an indicator towards some instincts I have on this one, being that John would like to get this more down into about the $10 million a year range. Ernest and his people are probably thinking that on the open market as a free agent, we can go out there and get 14, maybe 15. And so this may be where there's a happy medium to be found between the two. But I think that there is a little bit of not of a gulf there. There's a little bit of a divide there on the numbers right now. It's not just merely down to probably $1 million or so on this. And we saw last year with Noah Fant and Leonard Williams, you had to actually get right into free agency where they quite literally could face the offers that were out there and realize what was available to know that Seattle either had the best offer or Seattle had the best situation for what was out there on that market. And so not a guarantee necessarily are going to come back if his people are going to get that, I think, 14 on the open market. I don't know if John's going to swing that. He may, but I think he'll be very hesitant to do so, or they probably would have already gotten a deal done at this point. Next cut here that he's talking about is speaking a little bit about his reaction to the Eagles winning the Super Bowl, and listen very closely to what I'm mad at him. I call him Jonathan. Listen closely to what John highlights as to what got his attention and what he also doesn't necessarily include, if that makes sense. So listen just very carefully on this one in that regard of things. Let me get this cut up going.
What stood out to you as far as how the season ended up with the Eagles winning?
Well, it was a really boring football game, probably like our Denver, Super Bowl. And people were like, well, it was a boring game. And people in Philly are like, that was a great game.
Yeah, exactly. They were the only ones.
No, obviously, fast defense, playing sound defense, running the football, shooting explosives when you can, but protecting the ball, playing great defense. That wins championships. Yeah. That really was like, Philly did a great job. I mean, their defensive line depth is really impressive, and Coach Fangio does a great job with those guys too. So, it was just, you could just see Patrick. It was rough, like just right from the get go.
Yeah.
Pass rush, Fangio, defense, running the ball. You'll notice there's things in there that are there's something that was a little missed within all that. Yeah, just a little bit missed within all that if you noticed, and I won't try to lead you guys on that one. If you didn't hear it, then you didn't hear it. But one little factor that kind of got left out, I thought, specifically no reference to the Eagles on that offensive line. He does mention a little later in the interview the Eagles offensive line coach, But again, we come back to that development side, which is going to be kind of that theme I'm going to bring up here today on where I think John's at on this to try to help some of you, because there is a big part of my audience that's very frustrated with trying to understand John and what he's doing here. And their outlook on it is like, why isn't he, how can he ignore this? Why is he? Well, I don't necessarily agree with it, but I'm going to try to at least provide a little bit of an insight into where his brain's at and why he's thinking this way and what he thinks alternatively he can do to solve the offensive line issues. Another question here, kind of in regards to that, again, some of us wondering if maybe some of the ideology or outlook towards the offensive line has morphed here with time, or if, any part of what his philosophy has been morphed here with time with Mike Macdonald. He's asked this straight up here in this cut.
Has your philosophy morphed at all now that you're the guy in charge of everything? You're working with the new coach. Last year was the first year. Has anything changed in the way you approach, this is how we're going to draft, or this is how we're going to prioritize this position? Has anything changed in that, or is it still? Great
question. Philosophically, no, but process-wise, yes. I would say, how do we streamline our decision making, and how can we be more efficient? How can we help out the players as much as we possibly can in player development? Like, what kind of tools can we give them to help them improve? So, but philosophically, no, not really. We know exactly what our deficiencies are. It's, we can all see it, right? Mm-hmm. And we're like, we have a plan to address everything. Part of the acquisition part also is like, okay, what's the buy-in then with everybody so you can develop guys? You have to be a strong developmental team. When you get back to Philly, they've done a great job. Their offensive line coach is a really good coach, been there for a long time, and they've done a really nice job getting player acquisition and developing there, and that's what we need to improve on. We need to improve our ability to identify and develop, because it's like it's 50% both ways, and you have to be able to develop these guys. So the philosophical part is really like running the ball. How do we run the ball? How do we play super fast here at the coolest stadium in the National Football League, where guys can just get ripping off the ball? That stuff is all stayed the same.
I think you mentioned development 3 or 4 different times in that one clip alone, and that is again where we come down to something we've heard already him say in a few of these other clips. So it's a little bit like, I think he's given us some insight here where we think and we look at it and go, there's some talent depraved aspects of this team, especially on that offensive line. I think instead from him, it's no, he's pointing back to no, we just have to get our developers better. I think that's really where I take more into where he's standing on it and why he's kind of hammering it, I think so purposely. So in anticipation for a question that eventually is going to come down the line in this interview, specifically towards that offensive line. Next up, speaking a little bit to the Senior Bowl, and I thought that this is a little bit separate of the offensive line, just kind of an interesting cut, because he talks a little bit about some of how that dynamic is changing right now in regards to looking at these players and having more information to go off of than ever before with the NIL money and all of that type of stuff. So let's hear what you got to say on this one.
It's great to get back with the scouts, like all of our guys, being around our guys, being able to talk. We've been together so long now, we're able to kind of speak the same language.
Okay.
So it's pretty cool to like be around our guys. And yeah, it's cool getting down there and seeing the players in person, and then, seeing like a lot of these guys I haven't seen in person, some of the smaller school guys and guys that I wasn't necessarily paying attention to, early on, that have really come like risen through the process. And then, to not to come back here and have the guys back in the building this week is so exciting, because like I'm just like so impressed with all of our scouts, like all the knowledge, like all the stuff they have, especially with, all the trade portal stuff and guys leaving and like guys making money in NIL now. And like, okay, well, they know how much money these guys have made. And you're able to talk to like, if you coached at Oregon and you coached at Ohio State, you're able to talk to both those staffs about these guys. You know what I mean? So you kind of have a really clearer picture on these guys than we have in the past. Sometimes to our detriment from the decision-making process, but it is amazing to think about, because you can tell how much a guy, how much he loves football, right? And all right, he's already got $3 million in his pocket, and the way they spend it too, which is interesting. So they were just talking about, dang, I can't tell you. Shoot, sorry, I just let it rip. And they're just talking about a guy that gave a ton of money back, in North Carolina for the devastation that happened there.
And Derek Hall did that. Remember?
Yeah, Derek did. Yeah,
yeah,
the Wallers and yeah, exactly. But really cool, like how they spend their money, and is it flashy or how much, or they turned out, they stayed at a school, like they could have made another $1 million here, but they stayed loyal to the coaches, and it tells you a lot about the guys, or they don't. They're sitting out, right? They're not, guys, lateral ankle sprain, not a high ankle sprain, and he missed 4 weeks with it instead of a week. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just like it tells you a whole story, really. And it's kind of, at first I was thinking, hey, I do, believe that guys should get paid, to a certain extent. So, but it's just the difference in the spending between the schools. It's just what blows my mind when I'm listening to, all of our guys talk about their backgrounds.
It's a new dynamic right now with the NIL and how teams are going to have to evaluate these players. And it's, I think, only a good thing, because it's always the part I've said when we look at tape and we try to cross-reference what our opinions are on players. The one place that we have a blind spot towards that we don't, know about is that character stuff. And now more than ever, these coaches, as he said, multiple programs you can now go to where players played and talk to multiple different coaches, so you're getting the true story. I think that this is going to provide NFL teams much more of an ability now to really understand the player that they're getting upstairs. You have a guy, there's always that there's always that sort of switch that you hit with guys where you have a guy that hasn't maybe had much money his whole life, suddenly now becoming a multimillionaire, and he's an 18, 19 or 22, 23-year-old kid, sometimes 21-year-old kid. How does he react to that? Well, that we don't know. It's hard to anticipate if it's never happened. And now you actually have it happening at the college level and seeing what that does to these guys, and who really wants it and who doesn't, who's a really loves football and who doesn't. And I think that this gives them more of that ability, I think, to just narrow in on their focus from a scouting perspective. I'll also say too, whoever the general manager is that can roll with this into the future now and being able to really take advantage of this and look at it from that factor, as opposed to sort of just scrambling along, but look at for the advantage within this kind of insight that you can get that you never could before, will be one that, was able to, be a step ahead of everybody else. So interesting to hear him say that, especially about the sprain that he talked about. You have a little bit of a sprain, might keep you out for a week, but you go 3 to 4 weeks. I'll say that this does match up to some of what I am seeing from some of the guys that I've scouted in this draft, where you're seeing these whole chunks of season that they're out. You're like, well, was he hugely injured there? What happened there? Why was that guy out there? You have to kind of look through on some stuff. And so there could be something to that and something to consider in part of your evaluation process, looking at these guys too. If you see a guy not taken that you thought should have gone higher, backtrace a little bit and see if maybe that's a guy that wasn't out there playing as much. He wasn't as available. And they go, look, if he's already doing this at the college level, he's really going to do it once he gets up to the pro level of things. All right. Up on 7 here. We're going to get to some tougher topics of hand on this one. And John talking a little bit about position groups. He's asked a very good question here about position groups that you feel like you can address in free agency versus addressing in the draft. It doesn't give the greatest of answers here, I think, for you guys. On my side, at least you take it the way I took it. But let's see what you guys think on this one.
Hey, are there position groups you think are better addressed free agency versus draft, and vice versa? Like, hey, if I'm looking for a wide receiver, it's better we go this route, because we're looking at O-line. Everybody looks at the O-line and goes,
sure,
that's a problem. Is that something you think is better addressed with a guy that's got experience under his belt, that's a free agent, versus, well, let's draft and develop this guy and hopefully they're going to be good in a year or two?
Great question. I would say it changes every year by position, except for the offensive line.
Okay.
Because everybody's on this constant quest for offensive linemen and developing offensive linemen. And I mean, you brought up the Super Bowl. We just saw what happened in the Super Bowl, for crying out loud. They're playing for a world championship, and things didn't go well. So every team, everybody you talk to, it's kind of like, and so I would say yes, to answer your question, every position changes every year based on depth, but the offensive line there's always like this dearth of talent at the position. So, supply and demand, right? So, but there's, everybody's, when you talk to other teams, when you talk to other GMs about trades and stuff like that, or, our guys upstairs talking to other teams, everybody kind of like skips the offensive line, because it's like just a given. You know what I mean? Like everybody's looking for him. You know what I mean? So, and yeah.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, I get where he's coming from, and he's going to have some more expanded thoughts on this that I'm going to play in a couple of other clips. This certainly does dissuade us from him going out and being active in the free agent market when it comes to addressing the offensive line. The thing is, this is more of a fulfillment of what John said last year about interior offensive linemen being overdrafted and overpaid. And so this would seem to put that to sleep. And we get back to development, draft and development. And I want to just push a couple things back on at this moment of it right here, okay? This is one where I really want to just kind of hammer down on some specific particular items with this. He mentions at one point that we can't chase like we did, but we can't be chasing like we had before. We can't be chasing like we had before, intimating that they had done this before. They haven't done this before. I went back and checked, and the biggest deal that you've given out to a free agent offensive lineman was Gallery at 4 years and $15 million in 2011, who you cut a year after you signed, by the way. You never have paid offensive linemen on the open market. You've never done this. So ever saying that you've ever done this is a bit confusing to me. Maybe you've done it for other positions like we need an edge, we'll go get Draymond Jones, and that didn't work, but that's not the same thing as offensive line. I did just the quickest of arbitrary searches. Just the quickest. And I've talked to a couple of these guys already to you guys. Joe Thuney, 5 years, $80 million for the Chiefs. Smashing success. Been really good for them. Damian Lewis last year, 4 years, $53 million for the Panthers. Super success. He had his best season as a pro for the Carolina Panthers. Robert Hunt, really solid season for the Panthers, albeit they paid a lot of money for him in a 5-year, $100 million deal. Micah Becton. Micah Becton wasn't a guy that the Eagles just signed for a veteran minimum. That's not just, hey, here's a one, you're a former failed first round bust. Here's $2 million. That's what we'll give you. They gave him $5.4 million on a 1-year deal and then moved out a bunch of void years on it to stretch the money out. But they spent some substantial money on him considering what they already had invested in that offensive line. And then I found Ben Powers, Broncos, a couple years ago. Another big 4-year, $50 million odd deal. Been a really good player for them. And what stands out to me is that there's not a lot of offensive linemen that tend to get to the open market that are good quality. I'm not talking star potential here. I'm talking solid potential, solid ability. You know what you're going to get. And these guys don't tend to get to the market, but when they do and the teams spend the money for them, they tend to be pretty good players for those teams. What really stands out to me is that teams don't want to allow those guys to get to the market by and large. And they're going to re-sign their own guys, and they're going to redo it. And that's all the more reason why I and you guys on the channel and many others out there have really pressed to say, okay, well then, if you're not going to spend for it, then hammer it, damn it. Hammer the picks in the draft up high, if that's what you're going to do, if that's what you want to do. You know, if you just don't want to spend, then you got to hit it over here. You don't want to use this part. There's 2 different ways to use this to beef this up, and you don't want to use this wholly, then you got to hammer this part to get it to go. That's just kind of logical, isn't it? Just kind of reasonable, isn't it? And then he points to Kansas City, which again, to me, for a general manager who should be so very aware about what happens with Kansas City and the pathway of Kansas City, because Kansas City has given us quite simply just a righteous example of the power of offensive line and how much it matters. Because in Mahomes there in his time, from when he wins his Super Bowls to when he loses his Super Bowls, the difference comes down to offensive line play. And the Chiefs right now, as you look at it, the first time it happened with them last time, it was the interior started getting older. They lost Mitchell Schwartz. They lost Eric Fisher, their 2 tackles that year during their Super Bowl run year. They got to the Super Bowl. They were down a lot of linemen. They got overran by the Buccaneers. And they said, hey, that's never going to happen again. And they made a lot of different moves out there that offseason, and they hammered it, and they signed Joe Thuney to that contract I told you guys about, the 5-year, $80 million deal. You traded for Orlando Brown. You drafted Creed Humphrey. You really hammered it home to really address that thing. And then that got you back to winning a Super Bowl. Well, then what happened? You let Orlando Brown walk. You get an injury at your left tackle position. So then you're kicking Joe Thuney out to left tackle in the Super Bowl. So now your left guard and now your left tackle are weakened from where they had been. And your line gets overrun. But instead, it's not that. John references it's the great defensive line of the Eagles that made that happen. And yeah, give him credit. I'm not saying the Eagles' defensive line isn't good, but the whole part of this interview he keeps referencing is that defensive line and Vic Fangio and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And you go, yeah, there's a reason that line was bad for the Chiefs, because they unlearned They unlearned the lesson that they had learned in their Super Bowl loss to the Buccaneers. They didn't keep offensive line a priority point. Partly because they've been freaking throwing second and third round picks at wide receivers for the last few years because they can't find one that freaking works after they moved on from Tyreek Hill. That's part of the reasoning there. Let's keep it going, though. There's some more stuff he's going to talk about in regards to kind of this subject, too. In this cut, he talks a little bit about how you can't just throw money at the problem in order to fix it.
My dad always says
free agency is not like, you can't just throw money at something to fix it or to fix a perceived need. That's we've made mistakes there in the past, and we're not going to repeat. We're going to try not to repeat the mistakes we've made.
So again, yeah, I understand free agency is not a place that you want to fix problems and mistakes, but can it be? Yes, it can be. You don't want to overhaul your roster in free agency. You don't want to but you can narrow in on certain specific things like the interior of this offensive line. I presented a video yesterday on my channel here called the Double Dip. And the reason that I presented that video was just for the same reason why John did this interview and wanting to make sure that I present this out to the fan base on it. Because I'm fine with draft and development, and I'll trust in John on this. If he says, no, we ain't going to spend money, okay, fine. I'm not advocating for it, but I'll be okay with it. But at the same point in time, you could have done these moves. The two biggest contracts signed last year by offensive linemen were Creed Humphrey, who signed a 4-year, $76 million deal. And then you had Robert Hunt, who signed the 4-year, 5-year, $100 million deal or whatever. 4-year, whatever. So he's $20 million a year season, right? He's making $20 million a year, and Creed's making a ton of money per year on average too, right? If I took the first year cap hit of those two players, Creed at $5 million, and then you've got Hunt over here about $6.5 million, that equals out to about $12 million of a cap hit, collectively speaking, on the 2025 hit. So Ryan Kelly, Micah Becton, Drew Dahlman, one of the other guys, Tevin Jenkins or Trey Smith. Yeah, their average per year is super high, but you could fit those kind of contracts in here, and you cannot tell me that you wouldn't significantly be better than what you're going to be next year with what you're going to trot out there. But John does not believe a bit right now in where the talent is of offensive line across the sport. To give you an indication of that, let's give you this cut here.
offensive line, defensive line, more so. Do you see like the trend as far as offensive line goes, maybe starting to shift? My dad always says it's got to get worse before it gets better, so it might as well hurry up and get worse. But are we at that point?
No,
where
no,
it's starting
because to you guys' point, like, the defensive linemen are making $8 million a year for their NILs. I'm being sarcastic, $8 million, right? But they're making whatever, $3 million, and offensive linemen are making 200 or something. You know what I mean? It's just a big,
Wow.
There's not a lot of offensive linemen. They're doing sack dances,
Right. They're not
like,
I get where he's coming from. The defensive linemen are higher paid, but causation does not make whatever chorality. And that in itself does not mean that there aren't talented offensive linemen out there. And yeah, the better athletes may be on that other side of the ball, but it doesn't mean because there's better athletes on the other side of the ball that there aren't good players on this side of the ball too. And the way he talks about it, you would think that it's a wasteland out there, and that the best of the bones you pick from the wasteland barely got any meat on them. So why pick from a bone that's got just hunks of meat where I can go over here to this place and I've got all the goodies over here. And that's the place where I do worry with John in the long term on this one, that he's underselling a little bit of where truly the offensive line is at, how valuable it is, how much you got to invest into it in the modern age, what the price is to be paid when you don't do that, and what your offense will look like when you don't do that. As he has been very slow on this particular lesson to kind of figure out, what's what with it. Final clip here I want to play for you guys, then we'll get into some discussion on this a little bit more. And this just again shows to me that his eyes right now on this draft are definitely in regards. He's got an eye right now, I think, on defense. But here we go.
the defensive line guys are always like every year you could just like we're doing edge rushers today, and we've been going since early this morning, and there's a lot of edge rushers, but it's kind of like, what's your flavor ice cream? Like, what do you want? You want the short arm leverage? You want the guy with the power? You want like speed off the edge? It gets knocked around. Like, what do you want? And then that's how we're kind of, that's what we're sorting through right now. But there's every year it changes. There's like the depth level changes at every position.
Gotcha.
So if you want to put money down, I'm definitely telling you early on, it's looking like, especially that first round pick, if we're not, running up for a quarterback, it's probably defensive line, defensive end is just all the more to me. Arrow goes up more and more. Hearing him talk about that, where you hear him just on one side talking about linemen, not just the dearth, nothing out there. And then he's speaking about defensive linemen like ice cream flavors. So I think we're going to probably see him lean that way, which I start doing some math on this situation. And I go, okay, there's a dearth of linemen. You can't pay for the linemen on the market. You really like the defensive linemen. So we're going to do a little bit of the same approach we've done recently, which is maybe take a lineman once in the first 3 picks, maybe 2 in the first 3 picks. But if you're taking 2, then it's going to be a second and third rounder, and then hope on the development. And he spoke about development probably 5-6 times on those cuts alone. That's where this is going to have to land as far as the improvement is concerned. And it might work. It might be enough. It is the smart path if you can do it. I do come back around to, though, the driving force in some of these moves has got to be in consideration of what type of team you're looking to build for next year. Are we looking to build a team next year that truly contends? And if not, that's okay. As I've said for a while in this is okay if you're not, because you're going to have a young offensive lineman that's still kind of figuring it out, especially on the interior 3 positions. That's okay if they want to go that direction, but at the same point in time, I'm a little worried the team will be kind of on one hand pushing contention, but on the other hand, not going all the way to make that thing happen. Specifically, kind of ignoring moves like this they could make to really upgrade the offensive line and make this work a little bit better. But I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this as well. Did I take away something from this interview you saw it differently? Was it maybe that John was hedging his bets or just trying to play a little bit mysterious on this and maybe he's going to go hard on this on the other side of it, or that, hey, our linemen are close? Because I do look at it and go, I don't think we have guys in-house right now that are necessarily close, and that he speaks so much to this science going into this, and they've got guys in lab coats and they're writing down things and they're running tests on how to test better, and then they're bringing in AI and and I'm like, well, okay, all that stuff you talked about, where's the merit of that now showing up on these guys that aren't developing? I haven't seen Oluwatimi coming far forward as a player. Anthony Bradford coming far forward as a player. Salatoa Lamea was a fine run blocker, but he was absolutely in over his head completely as a pass protector. And if we can go through a variety of other guys that have been kind of a similar way, Stone Forsythe was at his worst here in his final season here. That man was out. That man played like through most of the first 10 games of the season. He was out for 2 or 3 weeks, and he was still leading the league in pressures allowed. So you go, okay, if this stuff, the development side, that's the part that I need to click in for my specific, my side of this is I got to understand, okay, you're leaning so hard on development, but where's the proof that your development's making that happen? It's just all on the new coaches to make it go down, no, it's all the old coaches become the bad guys. It's all Dickerson. It's all Hoff, our previous offensive line coach from last year. Maybe that seems a little bit simple, and it seems a little bit like kind of Patsy-ish to a degree too. But like I said, I want to hear where you guys are coming from on this, and appreciate you all watching today. If you can for me, please hit that like button. I do believe, though, if I say I just don't think we're probably going to do much in free agency now at this point, hearing his thoughts on this. But again, as I say on this too, it's important from my perspective on this that very well may be the case. But I didn't release that video necessarily yesterday saying that this is what's going to happen. I released that video yesterday so that I could let you guys know and so you guys all understand this could happen. They could go and make this move. And if they ignore it and the offensive line continues to go down again in flames like it has for the past 3 seasons in the same exact manner, I think that that's kind of noteworthy at that point, if they are going to take this position. And I hope not, but we shall see. I'm going to check in with you guys now on the chat. If you can for me, please just reference if you got any questions, comments today. Just if you can put Brandon, Hawksnest, HNB, hey, a-hole. I answer to most stuff. So it's, I'll probably, just about anything I'll answer to, but please feel free to hit me up in that way, as we do have a lot of inner chat that goes on in the chat. So just don't always respond to something that maybe something is meant for somebody else. C. Lord says, I thought the interview was fine. There was something in there for both the folks who want to be hopeful and those who want to be angry. We gotta fire John now. What's up, me? How you doing, man? Good to see you in the house. 12 says, you can't throw money at the problem, says John is a classic rich parent who sends their kids to private school about funding public education. Mythic, fire John, man. I'm sick of this guy and his refusal to actually try and build a contending team. Those Legion of Boom years were clearly a miracle. I think this is a little bit of my worrying concern right now, Mythic, and I don't think that this is what I believe. I'm just worried that this might be something that becomes a place here where, we have a team that's not as driven wholly at this point all the way through. And this is not a reference to necessarily coach, but just on what I'm looking at from this front office of, are you really driven here to create this contender? And if it's, or is it you're driven to make the contender, but it has to merely be by this way? And if it doesn't happen by this way, then the contender will not happen. And that's a little bit of maybe where my worry is right now with John's intractability when it comes to being more open-minded in how he deals with this offensive line. As I said, I can get where he's coming from on this to a degree, but he's also not tried this approach. Let me say that again. The man's been here for 15 years and he has not tried this approach. The majority of his time here, this offensive line has been in bad shape or below league average, and he has not taken the approach here of trying to find the solutions in free agency. Juggle says, is Howie Roseman or his assistant available? Yeah, someone throwing a bottle at Howie Roseman's head was the most Philly thing ever. BB says, when John turns this coaching staff around with Clint, I want people to have his same energy. We hired a whole new coaching staff with connections and people Clint knows. Grubb didn't have connections. Very true. Very true. And I'm not definitely calling for any firing on this interview or anything like that. I'm just, as much, I know that some of that's what's been saying a little bit in the chat a bit. Just, I'm more just a little bit concerned that I'm like, blah, 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 A couple donations here. Let me catch up on these. Don't want to get behind on the dumb notes. Chad Hart, thank you for the $5 donation. Chad, I appreciate you for that. Says B, I watched you and Dan Viennes on his channel about 2 weeks ago. I hear his girlfriend's a nurse. I hope she doesn't have blue hair or purple hair. Hey, it's a real, the blue purple hair thing's hot. It's hot. There's the hotness right now. You know what I mean? I know. Look at Dan bagging a nurse. Let's go, Dan. Thank you, Chad. Appreciate you watching, man. Thanks for the dono. Feed me with a $2 donation. Says, at least he didn't say they're overvalued. In John, we trust. There is that, at least. There is that. You got to look at the silver linings, man. Jordan with a $20 donation. Jordan, man, that is very kind of you. Thank you for the big $20 dono. Says, John has hardly ever tipped his hand on what he is doing during interviews. So I have zero idea what he will do. The only thing I know he said that he tells you where he is at is he said, we all know where we are lacking. The only thing I know he said that tells you where he is at is we all know where we are lacking. I would agree. That's definitely an insightful point on that. Thank you for the dono on that. I mean, I think he does give you a little bit, and look, I will give him complete credit. If this is Cloak and Dagger, James Bond, 007 spy stuff, and John just pulled the move on me off the opening of Bond where he's walking and he's just walking. He's just walking. He's going to ignore again, isn't he? He's going to ignore again. And then he does the move where he's like, and John opens up on me with it. I will completely give him credit for playing this so cloak and daggery in that way, if it is that in retrospect. There is just a bit of that baseline that, as I said before, is there with him, being that he has not been a guy that's gone down this road ever, really. That he just flat has avoided it completely. And so you do come back to, if to the heart of your comment on that, we all know where we're lacking and what he said, and that does mean that he is saying, look, we know, we acknowledge the line sucks. I know it sucks. We're getting it fixed. Then you just go, okay, but you're saying you're not going to spend in free agency, so you're only going to then do it in the draft on that, which again, that can work. This has worked for other teams with it. But again, recent track record has been, to me, that it hasn't worked for us just taking just that inroad. And it's a lot to ask a new coaching staff to come in and fix this thing that's been such a glaring problem, as you've been like a league worst offensive line here for years, and just saying, you guys do it with your play calling and your development. To me, it'd be much better to say to them, bring your development, bring your play calling, and we're going to increase the talent level too as well. That it can be all of those things. It doesn't have to be just one or the other. But we'll see what he does, Jordan. We'll see what he does. And if he does do a little bit of a gotcha thing, I'll definitely pat him on the back for it and be like, hey, thank you for, learn your ways and fixing your ways. As I said in the video yesterday, it's not about getting things wrong. Everybody gets things wrong. It's about whether or not you course correct when you continually get things wrong in a certain given area, or if you continue doing it the same way. But thank you, Jordan. Appreciate the $20 donation, man. Very kind of you, brother. Hope you're having a great night. Hand Grenade, thank you for the $2 donation. Says the O-line or friends we made along the way. We've got a lot of ex-friends O-lines on the way. Then that's for sure, man. Very much so. David Ventura. Everyone Seahawk fan. I got a survey, which is your guys' favorite Seahawk uniform of all time. I like this throwbacks myself. I'm a throwback guy. Sealord says John Satter has 1 year to couple from Pete. Fire James John Schneider talk is premature. If things don't improve next year with the O-line, I'll begin to have time for such discussions. Good point, Sealord. And I'm in the same boat. I'm definitely not in a position right now of asking for anybody's job on this. Just a little bit of some concern here as we walk into the off season, especially for something that I've been spending quite a few off seasons as we head into off season, making the same argument, making the same points that we could do this in past years, and watching us ignore it to the same failing results. Amazing Bar Brothers says, how are we getting to a Super Bowl when we have the third best general manager in our division alone, let alone the rest of the NFC? Well, we'll remain to be seen if he is in that spot. I know that he hasn't done necessarily the ton of the great work lately, but we'll find out, I think, in this offseason. I do. Definitely a lot of Fire John talk in the chat here. Alan, I'm expecting a middle of the road free agent and a couple of mid-round draft picks, 2 interior offensive linemen and a swing tackle. I really hope the coaching staff can bring it all together. I hope they can too, man. They've got their work cut out for them if that's going to be the approach that they do take, but maybe the staff is that good. A good offensive line coach can make a hell of a difference. We've been without one here for quite a few years, so we haven't gotten the fruits of that. Nick says, John needs a strong free agency. The NFC is weakened going into the offseason. McDonald clearly smells blood in the water. We need John to provide an actual return on investment this year. I'd like to see it, Nick. I'd like to see the same. Amazing Mario Brothers. It irked me how John said we can't just throw money at a perceived, quote-unquote, weakness. Is he really suggesting that our offensive line is not a true and legitimate weakness? That was a little thing I was going to say a little bit, Jordan, again, on your point with that a little bit of we all know where we're lacking comment, because there's kind of two comments that don't go together on that, right? Where, you go, what would be the perceived weakness on this team? Because just saying we have a weakness on this team, you use perceived, that I'm with Amazing Mario Brothers on this. I infer from that he's saying, you guys think this is this bad. It ain't that bad. What could he possibly talking about that? So I do agree with you, Jordan, where I thought when he said at first, we all know we're lacking, that he was kind of referencing into the offensive line, but at the same point in time, he comes back then and says perceived weakness. What other spot on this team would you look at as what else do we consider a perceived weakness? Not the receiving core, not McDonald's defense, not the defensive line, that's for sure. We got our linebackers in place. So that was the one that had me a little bit confused as well, that comment. Martin Lawrence says, Brando, the interview makes me nervous. Was hoping to see a focus on fixing the O-line. Now I'm not so sure John even sees it as a major problem. This was exactly my takeaway from this as well. I'm not completely sure at this point that he views it in as a problem. And I think if you don't, then you're less likely to deal with it in the major way that requires to get it fixed at this point. I don't think it just comes down to just improved coaching. I think that's a part of it. That's a part that needs to come forward. That's a part that has been lacking. But it's not the bad guy in the room here. You know, there's a couple bad guys in this room. Alan says on the bright side, it is a really deep draft on the interior, so it might work in their favor. It's a better draft for interior linemen than it's been in years past, Alan, to your point. That's true. 12 for life, I don't think it's time to fire John, but depending on what happens a year from now, that could change. I think we're going to find a lot of us that are still in a patient point of this year from now if the stuff goes down the same line of having a lot less patience at that point. And all the more reason you would think on this one to, from his standpoint, to address it. Noob Master says an offensive lineman definitely beat up John in high school. Yeah, he got put in at least a locker and maybe a trash can by a guard or a center. I'm not sure which at this point, but it could be either or. Thrill House Hawks Nest, at least he didn't say, we just finished Edge today, so we're taking an Edge early. Saying his philosophy hasn't changed means he's stubborn. I'm making it up with lip service every year. Yeah. A little bit. Juggle 8890 says 2-year master plan. Tank for Arch Manning, trade for Travis Kelce, get Taylor Swift to move to the Pacific Northwest. Peyton Manning becomes head coach, Eli OC, and Tony Dungy DC. It's the master plan. I love it, Juggle. Let's go. T-Money says, I'm not in the fire Schneider camp, but I do agree that he needs to change the way he looks at the O-line, obviously. That's what we want here, I think, above all else. I think people that are reacting a little bit with the knee-jerk going, fire him. I think it's just a little bit of just that angry reaction that I think is well angered, well frustrated, well-earned frustration, being that, look, this is years of this. This is not a one-year problem. This is not a one coaching staff problem. And we had thought that once he got out from under Carroll's shadow on this one, that it was more of Carroll driving that. But it does seem like maybe there's a possibility that maybe John was as much a driver of that as anybody. And it just doesn't make at this point, it really defies much making sense at this point to keep going down this same track. These results were god-awful this year. You couldn't run block. You couldn't pass protect. Your offense became non-functional the more the year went on as this became more of the case. Yeah, Grubb was not a good coordinator, but it just isn't just with him. Bill Anderson says the Hawks know very well what they need and what they're doing. I love the confidence, Bill. Herbicide says, when does all the stuff start happening in free agency? It's like March 11th, I think, or something in there, Herbicide. I believe that's the key date to pay attention to on that side of things. David says, Hawks Nest, Pete or Holmgren? You got to give Pete the nod. I mean, he got you to 2 Super Bowls, and Holmgren did a job very close to what Pete did. In a lot of ways, Holmgren had to really take you from really changing the mentality in that, that locker room and whatnot for where the organization had been. But you got to give tip the nod to Carroll on that one. Money says, I think him saying that is to save grace to the players. I hope so. Brian says, still feels like the staff and JS are leaning more towards developing the young linemen we have over adding more. It does seem to be that way. Yeah. John says, this is John's last chance in my book. Robin says, you guys get over the perceived word. He was just saying what they did in the post. Come on, let's move on instead of tearing our own team down. God. Yeah, I'm hopefully the point on this isn't to try to tear their own team down on this. And I'm very much a guy that wants to be in positivity in regards to this team, but I'm also a guy with the channel here too, Robin, on it's going to be honest with it and with the outlook of it. Could this be some, again, I understand certain people haven't supported John on this, and I can get that part of it. And I'm certainly not I get the people saying, hey, we're running to say we got to fire this guy. I understand too, going, wait, hold on, we can't go to that place of it. I get all that. But that this is not a valid frustration This is not just an item of a team on a checklist that they kind of need to get around to. This is something that John has ignored for 10 years. 10 years. And his approach to the position for 10 years has been the same way. So when people get to this point of frustration, as I see some people a little bit like yourself on the road might have a hard time understanding why people's frustration is at that point, I would point to you that, Your Honor. You give somebody something to chew on that's bad for 10 years, you can't be surprised when in year 11 they go, I'm tired of chewing on this crap. Give me something new. And so again, I don't say this as a guy to say let him go or that this needs to get to that range of things, but I think that people it's perfectly appropriate to be frustrated at this point with his approach, and that his words here are an exact alignment, actually, not in much alignment. His words today in this press conference are an exact alignment to what he said last year about guards and centers being overdrafted and overpaid. And what did he do last year after the back of that interview? Did he go and develop a good offensive line? Did he get one out there? No, it's once again for the 10th season. That was 9 seasons. Now we're to the 10th season. So I understand saying I still support John. I'm not saying don't support John. I'm not saying we got to let him go. I don't think it's the right time to fire him. But I do think that it's rightful to look at this and say, hey, people are going to be frustrated with something when you ask them to deal with something like this for so long and you don't change your approach at all. At all. The biggest free agent contract for an offensive lineman in John Schneider's history here is Robert Gallery on a 4-year, $15 million deal in 2011. That's the biggest one. He doesn't re-sign his rookies to second contracts. He lets them walk. He's made one major trade for an offensive lineman, being Dwayne Brown. He's moved another really good offensive lineman out in Max Unger and never really found an adequate replacement once he moved him. So I'm still very much a proponent of John. I still think that he's a good general manager. But we all have our share of Achilles' heels. And you can't let your worst thing be the thing that overtakes all of the good things. And I worry a little bit about this. We had this offseason that this might be the case with it. And hopefully the development can work and that can be enough in itself. And maybe it can. Maybe the new coaching staff can be enough in themselves. But you got that right then, not necessarily by doing something purely brilliant. You just kept trying the same approach and waiting for the broken clock to be that exact time of day. Roland says the team couldn't pass block or open holes in the run game. Took some time to figure out, and they could. Carter says, I'm here to say John Schneider's right. Overpaying for right guards isn't the way. The problem has been identifying talent at the later rounds in free agency. Other teams do a much better job. CJ says, Brandon, can you attempt to explain to me the thought process of the crazy contingent of the Hawk fans who actually want to sign Aaron Rodgers? I think Aaron Rodgers had a lot of guys that were fans of him that just really loved the way he slung the rock, and he was very unique in, the way he played the game from the quarterback position versus other quarterbacks. And I think that really, he's for a lot of people like their favorite QB to watch for that reason. The ball just came out. He could whip it and had a strong arm and, good enough mobility one time and could do some improv stuff around that. And so I think he just has those kind of people that really do like him in that way. But Rodgers is definitely not a guy that would be an answer here on this team, especially with his lack of mobility and our offensive line still needing to kind of come along. David, I was sorry, David, I don't do talk politics. And I don't do elections either, man. I'm a conspiratorialist, so I don't do none of that stuff. Roland Jose, when was the last time we drafted left guard as opposed to all right guards? Ooh-wee. Well, Phil Haynes was technically a left guard when you took him out of college. You turned him into a right guard, but he was technically a left guard when you took him out of college in the 4th round. Not a lot of other guys around that. I can't think of too many. Regardless, as Schneider admitted much that the evaluation of Lyman hasn't been where it needs to be. Hopefully that means they have a plan to improve on that. Hopefully so. The goes to Pete C. I think John learned from last season, but we'll see. I hope he did. Tezakaku says, hire me. I got this. Amazing Mario Brothers. I'm not saying John's a horrible general manager. He's just painfully middle of the road. Put another way, he's the Geno Smith of general managers. I mean, we'll see with him. I think he can still be a really good general manager, and I still think that he's got a overall really good process. I think they've done a good job, and in a place that he has corrected and he has fixed in the last couple of years, his approach to the draft has been so much more improved from where it was in the teens. But this will be, I think, a season that's going to be a very important one here for John coming up. Emily Watson says, do you think Haynes wasn't properly developed? My problem, Emily, with Haynes comes into the same place that's been recently with this team when they go out there and they get offensive linemen, and that is that they don't have a really good plan for what they want to do with the offensive lineman or where that offensive lineman would be best suited to play his best football. So Justin Britt had to fail out at right tackle, had to fail out at right guard, and then you eventually discovered that he could be a functional, passable center in this league. Ethan Posick, you drafted as a center, and then you turned him into a guard through the first couple of years. You drafted him in the second round, a second-round center that you then turned into a guard over the next couple of years of his career. Jermaine Ifedi should have been a guard day one, but you kept him out there at tackle. Phil Haynes should have been a guy that was a pass blocking. They did the most counterintuitive thing with Lewis and both with Haynes, and I still do maintain that Lewis, even though he's become good over at the left guard spot, would have been a better right guard in this league if he had just stayed there. And that's another guy that they moved out of position, in my opinion, for his detriment. It was more to fill our left guard hole than it was that's what was best for Damian Lewis. And Phil Haynes, they did the inverse. They took him off of being a left guard and then moved him to right guard. And yeah, he was not a power guy. Right guards need to be guys that are power guys that can take on the nose tackles. He was more of a pass blocking left guard in college. That was his whole thing. So yeah, it's been one of the other areas that I don't understand why they do it. I thought it was a previous coaching staff thing, and maybe it had been because they haven't done it with the new coaching staff as much. But definitely a place that doesn't help the development, Emily, when you move a guy off what is his natural best position. Martin says, look at the Super Bowl and see how good the O-line is. The best quarterback in the NFL playing behind a weakish O-line on the day through two interceptions, costing points, one pick six leading the other way. Surely John sees that. He does, Martin, but he references that as more of the great pass rush of the Eagles, and more than he looks at that as being that the Chiefs didn't have a offensive line up to snuff like the ones they had in place when they won their Super Bowls with Mahomes. That's where there's a bit of his difference in his outlook of it versus, I think, how some of the others of us would have looked at that. T-Bunny, who's your dream round one pick for the Hawks this year? Ooh, good question. That's a great question. Dream pick. It's hard because Team Money, I don't have as much a dream pick at number one. I like a lot of guys, but there isn't some guy that just really blows me away. I probably would be in the neighborhood of Kenneth Grant, Michael Williams would be two guys that would probably get me to that spot. I have very high grades on both those two guys. They'd probably be the ideal. Ricky says, John's benefiting from a spineless sports media here. The real question that should have been asked would have been, do you still not believe in spending on the interior? Eagles say hello. Would have liked to have seen, I do got to appreciate there's a little bit of decency there with Wyman and Bob on that and some of the questions they asked. I can appreciate some of that. I do wish there was a little bit more follow-up, and I hope that they do follow up a little bit more in other episodes of this. I know that they're not trying to make him uncomfortable and make him wiggle, but Ricky, I do agree with you. I think that there's times where the media, does not do what their job is to kind of do. You're there to report, but you're also there to to pick and prod a little bit and get to the heart of things and not just ignore things, because it challenges your relationship and your access behind the curtain. I don't like that part of it, but that's definitely something that exists in the Seattle media, is that there's a lot of media members that are most worried about their access behind the curtain. And they don't care if it means it comes at the price of doing their job less, because there's more security, I suppose, involved with them on the other side of it. Brian, Haynes just needs more time to develop the NFL level. It's different than UConn. It could be Brian. I mean, we'll see. And I'm not out on Haynes. I don't necessarily think in retrospect it's a bad pick now, when I thought it was a pretty good pick at the time. But he was a guy, Brian, that was supposed to be a pro-ready guy. That makes a difference. It's like when you look at these guys that are 21 versus 24 coming out, and guys that have started for 3 straight years, and you have a bit of a different outlook on those kind of guys as far as where you see them in their development cycle, and then how much more they're going to go as far as covering a distance in their development to get to the player that you hope they're going to be. I am hopeful for Haynes, but that was a pretty bad rookie year from him, and he looked completely in over his head. It can come forward hopefully this offseason, but that first part goes with the second part. Supposed to be pro ready, not a raw guy you're bringing in. This wasn't a Bradford type who had started 12 games at the college level. I'm not out on him by any means, but that's a little bit of where there's some hesitancy for me on that too, with it, where you go, well, yeah, but that other part was supposed to be the true part too with him as well. Thrill House Hawksnest, what's your feelings about the existing line guys going from pure shotgun to one off season of learning zone blocking? If we got no push last year, what's the difference he's got? A lot of the runs out of shotgun are going to come down to being more like, man on man, almost gap like stuff at times. We had some zone already worked into the offense last year too. So, I mean, there's some familiarity with running the zone. At the heart of the zone is this. It's going to have guys looking to create the 3 yards in a cloud of dust kind of plays, less of the negative stuff into the backfield. So it's a lot of you're hammering the B gap, and you're going to the B gap to the right side, and you've got your right guard and your center clicked up on the nose tackle, and then you're telling your running back to hammer it in right behind them. And if he gets the 3 yards first, and then after that, do whatever you want to go do then, but get the 3 yards first. So it's a little bit more, running backs don't always like this kind of scheme. I think there's some more opening in it to be a little bit more creative with Kubiak's approach to it. But it's one of scheme that should not be super hard to learn. In years past, if you're running the zone, you'd have to pick up a lot of extra stuff on cut blocking and do it. But so much of the rules have kind of patterned this down now, where it's just more of you're blocking to space, you're blocking to man. There's a little bit of a feel that you need from that, but all these guys going back to college are going to have some of that familiarity, in addition to having some of it already at the pro level too. Who the hell wants Rodgers, says Herbicide. Yeah. Even more Seahawks, thank you for the $2 donation. If the 49ers land Genty, I will blow up the moon. It's a possibility with the Niners being in a good spot there. They very well could end up being the team that benefits from him if he does dip through that first round. And boy, you can see so much as to why they would make that move from their perspective of things. You don't know where McCaffrey's health is at, and Jordan Mason's going to go in free agency. And so you got to probably get somebody else in there. And Genty would be a hell of a get for them. He really would. I could see it happening, Feed Me. It's a real possibility. God's Gang, thanks for the $2 donation, says, what's your thoughts on Kenneth Grant? I like him. So I don't know if you just heard there, that was one of my kind of dream scenario guys you could kind of get there in the first round at 18. I think that there are a lot of really good nose tackles in this draft. It is so different than what I've seen in recent years down there. We've got a good 4, 5, 6 legitimate guys who can play NFL snaps, who can be really good, who can give you good functional play from the position. And Kenneth Grant gives you more than that. He's got some really good lateral ability, some straight line explosiveness, a little bit of athleticism on a 340-pound frame. He is everything you want as far as point of attack, at the point of attack, just being rigid on the double teams, giving up very little space, being strong as hell. But then he gives you a little bit of the rarity as a nose tackle with some pass rush on the other side of it too. And you want to run games, you want to run stunts, and you want to run loops. This guy can do that great. Where a lot of times a nose tackle, if you're going to run that type of stuff, is not going to be quick enough to loop all the way around and come back and be a real force coming around the other side of it. But he can. So I think he's a very well-rounded player. I think he would free up Byron Murphy to get back over to the 3-tech position. And I think he steps in day one and he's immediately productive for you from that position too. You're not going to have to wait on him, God's gang. First round grade on him for sure. Chad Hart, thank you for the $10 donation, Chad. All the old farts live in Apache Junction in Sun City, banging hot nurses, blondes, brunettes, and redheads. You would need a California king-size bed. Go Hawks. I might have to get up to Apache Junction here, Chad. You're selling me on Apache Junction here, brother. You know what I mean? I got nurse my heart. You know what I mean? My heart, nurse, my heart. What is this Apache Junction you speak of, and why have I not been there? Dan didn't tell me about no Apache Junction. He's been keeping me out of the loop on that one. Go Hawks, brother. Appreciate you, Chad. Femi, did I skip your donation? I don't think I skipped it. If you were speaking about Genty? I think I was a little slow on him. Sorry about that there, Femi. Brian says, when you're 12, why would you ever leave Hawks Nest? You wouldn't. It's a trick question. Hi, Brandon. Hey, what's up, Brian? How you doing? Hawks Nest, how old? David says, Hawks Nest, how old were you when you became a Seahawks fan? How old are you now? Well, I'm in my mid 40s. We'll call it that. It's a good time to always show you guys my old picture, right? There you guys go. There's yours truly with the pops. Rockin' Hawk shirt. That's probably about 80, 83. I'm going to go 83 there. Okay. So I've been rocking for a while. I got 4 decades on my team right now. I got that 4 decades. Herbicide, so I got lucky in a mock draft and got to Torah McMillan. What do you guys think? I like him. I wouldn't be upset about that guy at all. He's going to be a hell of a player. I think he's very close to me as far as an evaluation to Mike Evans coming out. Henry Mars Glowinski was a left guard. That's true. There was Mark Glowinski back in the day. Forgot about him. Nagasi, you are right. I don't think McMillan will be there at 18, though. He's going to go in the top 10. Fabrice says, I don't understand people want Aaron on the team. He's washed. I don't understand that one either. But there's always a contingent out there. He says we should draft Cam Miller from North Dakota State. Haven't looked at him, man. Trying to check him out. 360 Bets says top 3 offensive line guys you'd want us to sign in free agency Hawks Nest. Top 3 for me would be top 3, huh? Top 3 for me would be I think the way I would prefer to go with it would be do like a Drew Dahlman, Tevin Jenkins kind of free agency period. Drew Dahlman, Trey Smith, something like that. But I could take the combination. It could be Ryan Kelly, Micah Becton. But probably that. You got the center, you got your left guard taken care of. You can let all those guys you got stacked up at right guard, duke it out for who wants it. Hand Grenade says, John doesn't trust an O-line for 10 years. Everyone calling for John's firing. John's surprised. Pikachu face. So 3-6, y'all go Drew Dalman, Trey Smith, Tevin Jenkins. I think those would be my top three. Probably Tevin Jenkins for Trey Smith, but probably he'll be cost less. We already got some kind of guys that might be able to make it work for right guard. Brian says John Schneider has signed or traded for 5 or 6 vets last offseason and drafted 7 O linemen the last 3 drafts. 7 O linemen in the last 3 drafts, all still on the roster, plus Sundell. He's invested. Well, I think there's a difference between you throwing quantity at a situation and putting quality at a situation, in my opinion, Brian. And while I certainly would say that when it comes to bringing on Abraham Lucas and Charles Cross in the first or third round, that's great. I don't think that it's worth a whole hell of a lot when it's more you're trying to take late linemen. You're trying to grab a Bradford, you're trying to grab an Oldwood-Teamy in the 5th round and saying that that's a representation of true investment. I think that that's a bit disingenuous on that. It's investment, but it's not putting good investment into it. And the issue with investment is that there's a variety of different ways to invest. There's drafting, there's trading, and there's being active in free agency. John has removed 2 of those and said, I will not do either of those 2. I will simply do this one way of doing it, which is fine, Brian. If he wants to do it that one way and it's actually working, then it makes a lot of sense to stay in that pathway of it. But it has not worked going down the same method. And Brian, yes, for 10 years, he's taken the same approach to the offensive line, and it's not worked. You mentioned about the veterans that he signed last season, but that's, again, more of a repetition from prior years. He signs an old Laken Tomlinson, who everyone knows is at the end of his career and has got nothing left, and then he doesn't give you a whole hell of a lot on the field. He signs a George Fant in his early 30s, who's been injured a bunch, who we know don't have a whole hell of a lot left on the field, and you don't get a whole hell of a lot from him. There's plenty of these guys from Gabe Jackson on down the line to Evan Browns to Austin Blythes that it's the same story over and over again where you go, well, he invested in Evan Brown, right, Brian? You could say that to me here in the chat. We go, well, look, Evan Brown, $4 million right there. That's investment, right? But there's a difference between just throwing a 1-year flyer on a guy and putting true investment into it, right? There's a difference between signing an Evan Brown and a team like the Carolina Panthers signing a Damian Lewis and a Robert Hunt, seeing their offensive line go up a notch, seeing their young quarterback who struggled behind the crap-ass offensive line in his rookie year now suddenly taking step forward in his development, now suddenly looking like a functional NFL quarterback in his development. So it's, that's one where you'll have to kind of walk me through that one a little bit and understanding where your perspective on this one is that I don't know anyone that's making the argument at this point that they've been putting investment in the offensive line. You spent as little money, Brian, on this offensive line as anybody in pro football. As I said, there's 3 different ways to get this done. You're choosing only one methodology of an approach to get it done. They're limiting themselves. They're limiting what they spend. They're limiting the pathways by which they can make this group better. It's not a shock then we look at the last 10 years of performance and look back on that 10 years of performance and that same approach and go, well, I can see why it didn't work. I can see why it was a league worst unit. So just my perspective on it, though. Appreciate where you're coming from. Nagasa says, what do you think about the Eagles having 400 plus million in void years? Their offense was the 20th most expensive this year. Ours was 17th. We spend more on offense than the Super Bowl winner. Part of why I say you got to make sure you're identifying yourself appropriately about where you are as a team for when you spend money and when you don't spend money. You don't want to be spending money if you're not sure you're ready to contend. But to your point, that's not been a limiting factor for them. 12 for life says Hawks Nest. We're drinking from the same mug. Hell yeah. You can get it right now in my store. Appreciate you getting that one, 12 for. Thank you for being a member as well. Damn, coffee tastes a little bit better coming out of this mug. Varman, thank you for the $2 donation. Yes, where do you rank Michael Williams in this draft class? I like Mikal Williams a lot. He is my second rated edge in this class. Probably right now is Varman right now is as good a time as any to show you guys an updated horizontal board, right? It's always a good time for a horizontal board update. We are up to 87 defensive players scouted. So we are making our way through here pretty well. Feeling pretty good about my progress on it. It's a process, folks. It's a process. But the guy you mentioned there was Michael Williams. I've got him currently as my second highest rated edge. I really liked his game. I think that he's just starting to come along as a player. The lack of production is explainable to me because the defense for the Georgia Bulldogs is one that doesn't allow for these guys to necessarily be really prolific when they come out. But I think he's got a little bit of so to me, I think he could be a power edge. I think he looks to me a lot like a Jadeveon Clowney, and who Jadeveon Clowney has been as a pro. Not the guy that Jadeveon Clowney was coming out for the number 1 overall pick freak show kind of outlook of him, but in who actually Clowney was as a pro, where he's been a really solid pass rusher and he's been one of the better edge defending run. I said that wrong. One of the better edge defenders against the run here in the NFL since he's come into the sport. And I think this guy could give you kind of some of that similar play. I think he's got some upside on top of it with Georgia and how much they use so much of their games inside and what they work inside on their games. And, you have to kind of be aligned to a role at times where you're not just getting to be a guy that just lights off the ball and beat your man in front of him. You watch the Ole Miss defense and they've got a bunch of, NFL prospects. Those guys are just able to just fly off the line of scrimmage and get after it. And Georgia, there's a lot of interworking parts and pieces to make their scheme kind of flow and work. This is why guys that have come out in recent years, the Trevin guy that Jaguars drafted off the edge and Jalen Carter, they just haven't always had the most production coming out, but you can still look at them and see them as those kind of players. So you can see here I've got my defensive horizontal board here set up with quite a few edges in the first round. Jalen Walker's climbed up in there for me now. Mike Green's at the end of the first round there. A variety of second and third round edge rushers. You can see why so many are so high on it on that side. On the offensive side of things, we've got, here's kind of where the updated board is at as well. I'll show you guys it here for a minute or two, let you guys kind of get a view of where things are at as I'm kind of adjusting things along here and there and everywhere a little bit. But Varman, I like Williams a lot. Second highest edge in this class. Don't have a blue chip grade on him, but I do think that he is going to be a real good pro. And if we took him at 18, I wouldn't be mad. I'd understand. Nathan Hawks Nest, are you going to join Tom Grossi on his charity stream he's doing right now to raise $1 million for children of fallen patriots? I would. I don't have an invite to it though, Nathan, but I would love to work with Tom. I've reached out to him in the past, but I'm sure he gets inundated and a real busy guy. And so it's, when you get to that level of it, I'm sure you're just getting hit from every which way as far as requests go. But I would always be open to it, but he'll probably have to reach out to me. I've tried to hit him up a couple times and I haven't had much of any luck on that side of it. Moody says, why are you streaming instead of watching the NBA All-Star game? I kid. Are they having an All-Star game tonight? Oh, goodness. It shows you how out of the loop I am. Fabrice B, do you want wide receiver or tight end first? McMillan would be the only wide receiver I think I would be willing to go with in the first round. I don't really want to go with tight end in the first round either, but if I'm absolutely driven to have to take a first round in the tight end, I'd take Tyler Warren. I'm hearing Colston Loveland. I'm getting a real heavy vibe of Colston Loveland going to. I'm feeling a very heavy vibe of Colston Loveland going to Denver. I don't know why, but I'm feeling like a little bit of that. And Varman, sorry, I was a little slow to acknowledge your dono. I get caught up in my chat sometimes, reading my chat, and so it does put me sometimes behind the donos a little bit. I usually get around to it, but I'm sometimes a little slow because I'll just get kind of caught up on my chat and stuff, what they're talking about. I appreciate the donation, though. Michael's awesome. Diamond Trucking LLC says, how much will we save by letting Lockett walk? $17 million. Varman, I do stream on Twitch too. I'll be streaming tonight actually over on Twitch. So it's the Seahawks Nest on Twitch. You can get the description, down in the description, a link as well to the Twitch channel down there if you want to sub up to me over there. But yeah, I'm popping over there, doing my thing over there at times. Roland says, which quarterback do you want in this draft outside of Ward and Sanders? I just noticed I have Jackson Dart twice. Probably Jackson Dart. I think rather than Jackson Dart in the second or third, I mean, third round Jackson Dart. If I can get him there, I'd be happy with that. Will Howard in the third round would be another one I'm happy with. I don't want to take those guys in the first or the second round. Getting a guy like Tyler Shock in the fourth or the fifth round, I'd almost be kind of about equally happy. I don't think any of these guys are necessarily going to be all that great, but I don't mind taking a flyer on them at that point either to see about the potential. I like them a lot better than a lot of other recent years, guys that are in that third, fourth, fifth round range of things. Phoebe says, Hawks Nest, how do you feel about John letting Mike look for his own OC? I'm very much in favor of it. I think the general manager should let the coach decide who he wants to bring in like that and let him kind of run the process. His job's the one on the line when it goes bad. I mean, if Mike has his defense going great and you as a general manager force some offensive coordinator onto him and that offensive coordinator causes things to fail, then that's a tough look. That's hard to then come back to that coach and say, you failed. You failed him as a GM. You really want the guy to have his chance to really, pick his guys and let him go on it. And especially with you already as a general manager controlling the players he has, at least give him that bit of control. 12 for Life says, doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over again and expecting different results equals definition of cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. This is my feeling on it as well. I don't have a problem with making mistakes. I make mistakes. Hell, I'm trying to always improve on those mistakes I make. Sometimes I'm probably not as good about that as others. But that's what I just am looking for from this organization right now. And I think that they did it with the Carroll move and finally pivoting off him, understanding we need a new coach. But there's a lot of things that need to be done a little differently. You didn't need to clear a whole house. You didn't need to, reinvent the wheel. But there was more than just, again, looking for these kind of, I think what we see a little bit here is at times of looking for sort of the one bad guy. Here's the one bad guy in the room. Nope, got rid of him. It's all clear. We're all good. Like, rather than that, let's go through this a little more purposefully and particularly individually, line item by line item, and really figuring out what is working and what isn't working. Because the bottom line brass tacks from a John Schneider perspective as a general manager, and he can put it all on Coach Carroll if he wants. I'm willing to put some of it on Coach Carroll, but I'm willing to put it all on Coach Carroll. And that's 10 years. You've got about 2 playoff wins, 2 barely playoff wins, a playoff win against Josh McCown at 40 years old with half a hamstring and beating the Minnesota Vikings in negative 55-degree weather. These are your hallmarks of success over the past 10 years. So you can't look at yourself organizationally and go, hey, Super Bowl contender, Super Bowl winner. You haven't been that in a long time. So how do we get to that? That's the point of looking at this, isn't to rake John over the barrel. The point of this is to fix these things, to correct the mistakes, to stop making the same mistakes. Because you keep making the same mistakes, it's very easy to understand and deduce you're probably going to see the same results. CB23 is celebrating his first donation onto the channel. Thank you, CB, for the $2 donation. It didn't put any comment on your donation. He put game over. Game over, man. Well, I appreciate that donation. Very kind of you. Very kind of you. Randall McDaniel in the house. What's up, Randall? Appreciate you for the $5 donation. He says the defensive end from Texas A&M. Is it all about upside with him? Maybe I'm just down on the stats or lack of. Is he similar to the guy from Texas Tech got? Great questions, Randall. Fantastic questions. And he's talking about Shamar Stewart, the very talented edge out of Texas A&M. And he's an interesting player. Yeah, so am I. And I know what you're talking about on the production stuff, which is fair. We got about 15 Stewarts in this draft. I think the problem comes in a little bit on this, Randall, of talking about him in the first round. That's especially where you have some issues there with him. He's really young. I want to say he's like 20, 21 years old, something like that. So there's a lot more upside to be had from him. He is built in a way that guys just 6'6", 290. He's really built unusually and moves unusually for a guy that is that big, and it stands out on tape. Where you're looking at a guy going, man, guy move like that. Like, what is he? Is he 265? No, he's 290. What? He's moving like that? Couple sacks this past year, Randall, but interior defensive line production and sacks and high pressure rates. I mean, there's some guys like a Derek Harmon of Oregon that's going to stack that kind of stuff up. There's other guys out there that, like a Jalen Carter, who only had, I think, 4 sacks in his final year in college, yet still was a top 5 pick. It is the part why I push a bit more down, Randall, of Shamar into the second round, where some people are right now mocking him up into the first round for the Seahawks, as I go, I'm a little worried about the upside as a pass rusher necessarily. The place I don't worry about with him that he does bring that I think could be very enticing to the Seattle Seahawks is this is a true power edge. This is a guy 6'6", 290 that you are not going to move. No tackle in this sport is moving him off that edge. And he's going to control things at the point of attack over there. He's going to force things back inside. He gives you some of that upside that's there in the position, young player, but he's more freakish, I think, even than the Texas Tech guy, who I think was more, there's some similarities there to him. That guy was more of a length, kind of tall guy with levers that could kind of try to, lock you out, long arm bull rushes, power rushes. This guy's got a little bit of some bend and dip to him for his size, and he just kind of bounces a little bit differently. He probably weighs about 15, 20 pounds more than the Tyree guy did, I think, as well. There's some stuff there to them, but again, too, that comes down to why, some of these guys I'm relating him to be a Jalen Carter or the Tyree Wilson, where you go, look, that's why in a Tyree Wilson's case, I don't want to take that guy top 10. You take it more second round, and then that's where you're more fitted to take that risk. You get a little bit more touchy when you talk about first round taking those guys. But he had a great Senior Bowl. I think he's going to probably go in the first round one way or the other, Randall, and could prove to be a guy with some real high upside to him. It's the high upside there more than it is the floor with that kid that's drawing people in, which can be dangerous territory. Varman with another $5 donation. Thank you for that, Varman. I also love Williams. Amazing build and could be a top 5 edge in this under Mike. Also Grant or Williams. Also also love the content. Well, thank you, Varman. I appreciate that. Very kind of you for saying that. Boy, give me a Sophie's choice there with the Grant or Williams, huh? Ooh. It's back to the point in your comment a little bit here where I feel like with Williams, he's such a beautiful, pure fit for Mike Macdonald's scheme. And I feel like where this scheme begins in doing the research on Macdonald last year and really looking into this defense and trying to understand it, people kept coming back over and over when discussing and describing the defense to saying, it's about the power edges. You've got to get the power edges in place in order to make this defense work. And Boye Mafe is really good against that run, and he's close at times to a power edge, but not quite there. Derek Hall has the power and strength for a power edge, but in the run game does not play like a power edge. And in Williams, you would have a guy there that would play it that way and also gives you that bit of freakish upside to him and where he could develop. Grant or Williams, man? Varman, I've got to go with Williams because Williams is right on. He is right on the line. I'm really hard served to give a blue chip grade. You can see on my horizontal chart here, I have one blue chip grade on an offensive player. Like I've removed Will Campbell, who's not even my number 1 left tackle anymore. I've got Ashton Genty as my only blue chip player offensively speaking in this draft. And then defensively, it's Mason Graham, Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, Will Johnson. That's it. Those are my only true real blue chip guys that I think have star potential. This guy's on that line. Grant's not quite on that line. He's just a solid first rounder. So I will go with Williams, but I would be very torn. as I like both of those guys, and I would be equally ecstatic with either of those guys at 18 almost. But I think Williams has got a little bit more, more of that ceiling to him. Carmen Schofield, thank you for the $5 donation. It says, this isn't a draft question. I'm curious your thoughts on Tariq Woolen. Do you think he turns the corner this next season? Should the Seahawks move off of him or not? That's a great question. I was getting into a pretty good debate with one of my guys in the comments here just prior to the going live today, having some discussion on this. As I know that there's some people that I think have reached out on me on thinking I was being a little bit hard on Woolen, and because I put out in my perspectives. I like that word. Carmen, I put my perspectives as far as the offseason that I'm expecting from the Seahawks, that one of the moves that I am anticipating that they're going to make is to move Woolen. I think that there were some signs that were discouraging from him last year. He's not a bad player. He provides some good stuff to this team. But whenever you're doing these kind of moves, they're also not just about what's going on in the moment. They're also about what you project and where you see things going. Woolen's going to cost you $5 million next year, so he's not on a cheap rookie deal. He's not costing substantial money, but he's not cheap, especially for a team that's currently $13 million over the cap. You move Woolen, you clear $5 million off the books. I'm not sure that I believe the coaching staff's going to look at Woolen this past year in his third year and say, this guy's really coming far in his development. He's really coming forward. There's also a bit of a sense of urgency to this situation because Woolen has one more year and then he's a free agent. So you have to decide after this year if you're going to put this guy on a contract extension or not, or let him walk for nothing. And because the Seattle Seahawks have so much cap space next offseason, if they let him walk, they're not going to get a compensatory pick back for him. So this is where, in my opinion, smart organizations make these kind of moves where they get a year ahead of things rather than a year behind things. So if you're in the house going, look, from a McDonald's perspective, from Schneider, I would walk up to McDonald and I'd say, what are the real true chances you feel in your heart here that Woolen's going to take a step forward here and be worthy of us giving him a contract extension where we pay him $17, $18 million per season? Where's your confidence in that right now, McDonald? And if coach came back to me and said, not really high, 50-50, maybe it'll come on, maybe the light won't. Then at that point, I think that there is some potential value of him on the open market for a team that will look at his coverage ability, look at the interceptions, get caught up a little bit in that, and you can sell high on a guy that you're not going to intend to either, that you don't see taking that step forward, nor do you see yourself signing him to an extension after the season. So it is a little bit of a tactical decision, not just purely on the fact that Woolen is somehow bad. He's not bad. It is more based upon the fact that just not exactly a fit to this defense, and that there's maybe some reticence to believe that he's going to come forward in his development from the team's perspective. I don't know that this is exactly the way it is. It is a bit of me making a prediction here more than it is me saying I know this is how it is. But I do have a sense that this is a little bit of probably where the team's going to go, I think. I don't know that Mike's going to be in favor of this, and that disciplinary thing that he had go down at the end of the year last year against the Vikings, that was a warning sign to me a little bit in the grand scheme of the season that he was having around that. You're going, But we'll see. It's an interesting decision on their part, Carmen, because you do have just that one more year of club control, and so you're probably going to have to figure out one way or the other what you want to intend to do with this guy. And maybe it is just to let him play out the year and see if, get him in hungry in the final year of his contract, trying to go get that deal done. And, they're like, well, if he does go out there and ball, we'll just franchise him. But then again, team's been very hesitant to use the franchise tag in years past. So they may not be willing to go down that line with this one. Cool Breeze, thank you for 2 months as a Hawks Nest member. I appreciate you for that. From signs that John Schneider has been giving us lately, where do you see his overall job security? What is his window realistically with Jody Vulcan, 12s? I don't think that the impression I would get on this is that I don't think that he's necessarily under much pressure at this point as far as, he's got a warm seat underneath him or that Jody is dissatisfied with him. I think he's being given some time here with the situation with McDonald to figure this out. I don't know if the overall potential of a sale could impact this too, but my feeling on this is the sense of it just seems to be things are kind of comfortable where they're at right now. And again, that's a guess, Cool Breeze. It's definitely a guess, but that is my sense on it. Jeffrey Thistle has been celebrating 33 months, almost 3 years here as a Hawks Nest member. Thank you for that support, Hawks Nest members. We will be getting out I'm going to do a mid-month call-in show here with you guys here this week, so I will get that out to you guys shortly. So be on the lookout on your community posts for that. I just want to see a functional offense, says Jeffrey. Been a defense first team my whole life. Only time been a defense first team my whole life. Only time our O has looked good is when we got Russ or Hasselhoff. Very true, Jeffrey. We have not been offensively inclined here in Seattle throughout our years. That is to be sure. It's been quite a bit of time that we've had defensive driven, offensive inept, limited, and we've had to get by on it. So I think we'll see what Kubiak can do. He's going to be hopefully a balanced attack, but maybe he can be the guy to take us back that spot, Jeffrey. You're right, though. It's been little blips of offense here or there, surrounded by a lot of defense and not necessarily great offensive play. A lot of running the ball. Randall McDaniel, thank you for another $5 donation, Randall. Any corners at 18 to replace Reek? Michigan kid that good, hasn't played much. How about round 2 to 3 guys? Anyone in free agency? I wonder if Ball will move Humphrey. Baltimore might move Humphrey. We'll see with them. Where they're at with their cap situation. Will Johnson is the Michigan corner that you're talking about. He is one of those guys I do have a blue chip grade on. Now, the blue chip grade is going to derive mainly from his performance last season, because I do believe that he was injured this year, and I don't think that he was at 100%, and he was being a good soldier and fighting through it to try to make it go, but he was not at 100%. The guy that won Defensive Player of the Year this year was Patrick Surtain. I think that since Patrick Surtain has come out in his draft, this kid might be the closest comp to Patrick Surtain that we've seen. He tackles. He's really good in coverage. He's kind of just boringly good. Where it's like a Stephon Gilmore, where the guy's just always tight in coverage, always in the right space. He'll come up and tackle. He'll come up and hit. A complete player for the position. It's always one of those guys that I put a blue chip grade on that's got kind of the star potential, but I don't even know if he's going to get to being like a star guy, into that place where you're just like, man, that's just one of the better corners in the sport. He just gets the job done. Don't know if he'll be a pure pick guy, a lot of interceptions on that side of it, but he'll be well-rounded. He'll do it all for you. And I feel really good, especially if his medicals check out, that this kid's going to realize that potential. Humphrey with Baltimore has been a long-time good cornerback for them, still coming off a good year for them. Possible that he could be a guy that they could look to move on from. You never know what their direction they're going to go this offseason as far as Baltimore goes. See where the cap situation's at here with that, Randall. Yeah, they only got about $5 million in cap space, so they definitely could be looking to move. They do save a significant amount of money. They do save a pretty significant amount of money. They do still have some dead money on the other side if they did that, Randall. So it's not pure 100% savings, but it's about $10 million. If they want to move on from Humphrey. And Randall, I will say this, when it comes to the draft, that there's a lot of guys at the corner position when you look through the draft. I'm still getting through all the names, but I've got 3 first rounders, I've got 4 second rounders, I've got 3 third rounders, and then I've just got a stack in the 4th round. And I think you could definitely find a couple of guys in here that could work for sure on that, Randall. Definitely. Just where you want to target and which ones you want to pick. I think 4th round onwards, you're kind of getting guys who could become starters. There's a little bit of that risk involved with them on what they could be. I think there's just more certainty to the 2nd, 3rd round range of it as far as guys that should be able to come in and start for you probably day 1. But it's a good draft for cornerbacks. I think if you went for this draft, I think Randall went with like, where's the strongest draft and what positions where, and what's the best on this? I think you'd probably do something like, say, edge, running back, defensive tackle, and then you might get to corner as the next one as far as depth goes. So a good year to be picking corners if the team wanted to do it there, Randall. There's some There's some really good ones, and a variety of ones that I think would fit into this defense. They played zone, they played man. There's some better tackling corners than we've seen in recent years in that spot too. Randall on top of that. A couple of different ways they can go with it, though. They're not limited. King Bomber says, my initial thoughts to this John Schneider show was very meh. I don't think it meant as much as to what they were going to do. What I take more from this is that he stated that they have a plan and strategy to address this, at least in years prior. It definitely looked like they didn't. If they signed Dahlman to a 4-year, $50 million deal, that'd be the highlight of the offseason. I would agree with you there, man. Agree. War Chief says, T-Mac McMillan would be awesome. He's our hometown favorite and my father's son. And if he's anything like his father, who is 6'7", former Animal Major League Baseball player, then he will be worth his weight in gold. I don't think he'll be there for us, War Chief. I do think he's going top 10, man. I think the more teams look at this guy, the more they're going to just see the echoes of Mike Evans, and Mike's going to help this kid, I think, in getting drafted. And look, I think the comparisons are fit. Very fit. Roland says, it's hard to expect a rookie to play well right away. Get some good experienced O-line until the rookies develop. Agreed. Part of why I've said I would have been okay if they wanted to take the patient approach with just drafting offensive linemen. We're not going to go out there and get the certain guys, but then understand with your team that's going to be a lot less likely that you're ready to contend for 2025 if you're having a line that's trying to work out some kinks and learn the ropes and understand how to be a pro, and you got 3 different positions trying to figure that all at once. It's going to be tough. Juggles says, what's worse, letting go of Saquon Barkley or trading 3 first-rounders for Trey Lance? Oh, probably the Lance one, because the Giants letting go of Saquon Barkley hurts, but it didn't cost him a Super Bowl. The loss of the 3 first-rounders you gave up for Trey Lance and got nothing for it probably cost the Niners a Super Bowl. They've got those 3 first-round picks in place playing for that team, helping them out. Probably enough to push them past the finish line. King Bomber says, I do get that he said that you can't pour money into a perceived need, and expect it to go away, which I think is true to some extent. I mean, it's maybe King Bomber. I mean, I think it's true to some extent, but I also think it depends on position. And I think that even he highlights in this interview and talking about the offensive line that it's its own separate creature, its own separate animal. Now he looks at it like there's a just dearth of options out there to pick from. And I would offer that is the case by and large, and that you get into most off seasons and that there's not a lot of really good offensive linemen even to pick from within free agency. This year is a year where that's a little different, where there are some good guys that are getting out into free agency who would be quality upgrades over what you have. And the thing with when he says you can't expect to sign it away or whatnot, is that some of these teams did. I mean, the Chiefs did exactly that a couple of years ago. You drafted Creed, but you also brought in Orlando Brown, and you signed Joe Thuney and signed another guy on top of that. You made those moves. You made a point of emphasis. You hammered it. It seemed to work out for the Chiefs pretty well. Got them a couple of Super Bowls on the back of that approach. So that's like, you can find examples kind of on everything working and not working. I don't think that there's some, in the way that John talked about it, that there's some general, hardened rule of thumb that this can't be a point of a way of fixing. Look at the Panthers last year. Here's another example. Here's a recent example. They go out last year and they give Damian Lewis $13 million per year. They gave Robert Hunt $20 million per year. Everyone was like, oh, what are you doing? It's crazy, including myself. But in retrospect, getting those guys stabilized in those positions helped the development of their young quarterback. Their offense was better for it. It worked. It was not a representation of failure. PP More Seahawks. Teams see something work and they hammer it to recreate it, like safeties. I want to go in free agency, but all in online. I think getting better at developing could save up money and improve John depth. Something got left out there, I think. Joseph Brandon, I know you're all for trading Woolen. I get it, but who do we get for $5 million that's better? Well, again, I'm not so sure that I feel like Woolen has set this standard in the way that he's somewhat talked about by the fan. Because people have pushed back on me in this way. So it's exactly in this direction of it, Joseph, where I was just getting into this comment today a little bit with it. Woolen's not a bad player, but he's not setting a standard for the position that we can't go out there and find. Do I feel like I might be able to go find a 4th round cornerback that can give me pretty close to the level of performance he gives me right now? at a highly cheaper rate and take that money and put it in elsewhere? Yeah, I do. I think it kind of gets overstated a little bit on this thing with Woolen. I'm sitting here hammering a drum to want to see Woolen traded. I just put a perspective of what an offseason I was anticipating from the Seahawks. They might not move Woolen, and if they don't, I'm not gonna be mad about it. It's not gonna make me angry. It's not a ditch I'm trying to die in. Let me put it that way. But I also think that there's a tendency at times, I'll say on this, Joseph, with our fan base to overinflate, and it's the good thing I love about us Pacific Northwesters and 12s is that we love our guys, but I think we sometimes end up falling in love with our guys too much. We end up going, they get elevated to this place that they're not really there as a player to earn that elevation. And I run into this with quite a few players at times where I'm like, yeah, the guy's fine, but he's not that great. And part of, again, the math on this isn't just about the Woolen and the 1 year and $5 million. It's also about, again, the future of it being, do you intend to sign him? Do you intend to let him walk for nothing next year, John? Is he a part of this future really in your guys' outlook of it? These are the questions I'd want them to be asking at this point. And if the answer came down to no, he's not really, then, I think that there's a better move to be made by, let me take you through this, Joseph. You move him for a third or fourth. You package up all those extra 4th and 5th round picks, move back up in the draft and get another corner. It's like, I think you can go that pathway with it too. So I think that there's other ways to potentially bring in a guy that can give you pretty close to the level of performance he's given you. My guy gave up 6 touchdowns last year, 500 yards receiving or something. It's like, it's a good year in certain respects, but there's other respects of it where it's like, there's some bad there on the other side with it too. Jose, can you see Michael Williams being there at 18? It's possible, Jose, because the top edges in this class have such a wide opinion on team by team, what you're hearing from teams. Abdul Carter is no doubt about it looked at as that dude, that number one guy. But then when you get down to the next couple of guys, there's some people that like James Pierce next. There's some people like Jalen Walker as the next guy. There's some people that really love this Mike Green guy. And I've seen him being elevated as high as 12th, Jose, on certain boards. So like all of these edge guys in this class are all kind of different. Abdul Carter is your Von Millerish guy. Michael Williams is your Jadeveon Clowney guy. James Pierce is your, kind of like a Jared Verse guy a little bit. Jalen Walker's a little bit like a Bruce Irvin type. Mike Green's just kind of your freak show, small school, could be upside, super twitchy. They're all a little bit of different in what they bring to the table. So it takes the right team of marrying to the team that loves that particular player that they want to see. I would say he's probably not likely to be there, Jose. Probably not likely. But I don't have a good read on there being a certainty on that stack of those guys where there is 5 first round edges. The order by which they go in behind Carter is a little bit murky right now. It's just a little bit. Varman, thank you for another $2 donation. Varman, he says, watch Michael be a superstar under this defense. I could see it potentially coming along. He's got that sort of potential with him. And those Georgia guys are so intriguing when you come to the defensive line because that you just watch how much they have to run within the games of the system. And, when you're running so many simulated fronts and stack pressure and all that stuff and blitzes, you're going to ask guys to take up blocks and to serve a certain role. And, be here ready for the quarterback to flush up to the front of the pocket as you loop back around. They have them doing a lot of these real intricate things defensively speaking, and it doesn't let those guys really show off their best selves at that point. And so it requires a little bit more math in making the evaluation of them. But he does have, just to me, some freakish elements where I could certainly see some star potential in this guy, Varman. I like him a lot. Initially, until I started to get a better understanding of how Carter was used and how just kind of, really working off that edge like they've just started to do with him. I was almost driven at certain times to almost like Michael a little bit better in just the physical tools that he's dealing with and working with. And like you say, in this defense, that power edge and that kind of player to work into this defense is just a perfect fit. Why did Jadeveon Clowney have his best year of his career in Baltimore that year with Mike McDonald? Because he was finally in a defense that was going to use him in the right way. Perfectly utilize him in that way. King Bomber, is Jonah Savania still a tackle for you after the Senior Bowl? Bro was getting cooked? No, he's a guard. I just have him listed at tackle right now because I'm not sure if teams are going to look at him in that same way, King Bomber. But I think he's more likely to be a guard. I do think he'd probably be in the same place for me, guard, tackle, in that second round area, wherever you want to put him. Josie says, B, do you think John regrets letting Damian Lewis walk? No, I don't think he wants to spend that kind of money for linemen. And if he's going to spend that kind of money for linemen, it better be left tackle. Would be my impression on it. I don't think so. King Bomber also, I don't think Parker Brailsford declared. Not too sure, though. Let me check. Some of these guys were real late on their prior. You're right. Let me get him off my board, man. Thank you for letting me know. Well, he got the fourth round valuation that I gave him, and King Bomber, that was enough for him to go, man, I got to go back to school. That's not high enough. Hand grenade B, hypothetical. John ignores O-line again, gets fired. Who would you like to replace as general manager? Personally, someone from the Eagles, by how well they find players. I don't have really a general manager in mind right now that I'm not too well knowledgeable about the GMs out there on the market that are kind of waiting around for a job, or the up and coming guys. I'm not as connected into that. It's kind of like assistant coaches and knowledge that that's a little bit outside of my purview necessarily. Baltimore wouldn't be a bad place to go look at. Eagles wouldn't be a bad place to look at. What's up, Donnie? How you doing, man? Happy National Flag Day. Troy Peterson says, could the Seahawks sign a few players to fill holes, add strengths, and just use the first few picks of the draft to add the O-line? Could that team building work? Certainly could, Troy. And, the majority of guys that are high paid in this sport on the offensive line are those guys that were drafted by the original teams. They're not guys that have even made it to free agency. And that when you look at the teams in the league that have the best offensive line for the most part, Philadelphia Eagles, Detroit Lions, these are all self-made offensive lines and how they've been built, mostly just through the draft and whatnot, augmented through other areas bit by bit. And I'm okay with this approach in general terms, Troy. I don't think it's a bad approach. I think that you have to acknowledge, if you're going to take that approach, that you have failed in-house to develop those guys, to draft the right guys. I think, too, it's also a little bit of the part that doesn't kind of sync up in my brain on this, if the approach is to just go and draft and not spend any money and we'll just draft and we'll just develop. Well, I'm okay with that, but then why are we deciding that 2025 we're ready to contend if we've got to rebuild the whole interior of an offensive line and hope it's going to be a bunch of young bucks that come forward in 25 to make that happen? That seems like a reach to me. I could be wrong on that, but it does feel like a reach to me. And so there, I guess, is that difference if we come down to, Troy, between something working short-term versus working long-term? What is the team right now in more of a short-term view versus the long-term? We have two different philosophies that are kind of banging up against each other. We want to win today, but develop for tomorrow. Well, is it about today or is it about tomorrow? And as I always say with this, if you're trying to serve two masters, you're serving none. You're taking that middle road. And I think we're potentially seeing that a little bit here in their approach on this, which has me a bit disgruntled, because in this last 10 years, not only have you not been able to build a good functional offensive line on the back of this very same approach that we're discussing, Troy, but you've also, as I've said over and over again for 10 years, every single year, come back and told your fan base that you're contending, that you're ready to contend, that you're ready to be up there with the best of the best. And you weren't close to doing that. Come back again on this when I talk about these kind of things that I have as criticisms in regards to this current front office and team. It's just that they are very slow to learn lessons. They're very slow to correct their mistakes. And this is about a sport right now that's about aggression and fixing things, fast when they come up, plugging those holes quickly, not letting the holes get bigger and bigger and bigger until you finally like, oh my God, it's so big. I better do something about this. Pick up, what would you do to make the Pro Bowl better? I think that the Pro Bowl is irrelevant. I don't think it's ever going to be relevant. I don't think it serves a really good purpose at the end of the day, because this is a sport that just doesn't lend itself to all-star contests. Not the way that people would want them, where they're out there hitting each other hard and really trying. You don't want a guy to be lost for a year, lost in his career, playing in these kind of games. I just don't think that they add very much value at all. And I think all-star games in general are pretty useless and pointless. Cooper says, I agree. John Schneider seems very cozy, and I don't get any vibes that he has any stressful talks with ownership, etc. I don't either. Yep. I'm getting the very same sense. Black Thought, Brown Dreams. Thank you for the $2 donation. I appreciate you for that. Very kind of you. Very, very kind of you. Varman with the $2 donation says, do you think we can fill all the needs, though, this offseason? Well, I think it just depends on the team's approach on this a bit. You know, if the team is looking to draft offensive linemen and develop, and that's the way they're going to go, and they'll spend their money in other places this offseason, then yeah, they can go and address everything this offseason, Varman. They have plenty of cap space. I know that they're sitting on $13 million of negative cap space, but if the team wanted to contend, if the team wants to go out there and be aggressive, they can go and do so. They've got $53 million easily, quickly that can be cut without even batting an eye, letting go of guys like Tyler Lockett and Draymond Jones and Roy Robertson Harris and both of the fans. So there's a lot of ways to pull levers to clear the money if they want to do that. It just all comes down to intention. And that's really where I've really wanted. There's a couple things here I'd like to see from the team. Correction, how they address their offensive line and really fixing this problem that's been so long standing. And then also the second part of this is to identify correctly where your team is at and where their potential is at for the upcoming season. Not that you know you're going to go win a Super Bowl, but that you know you're a contender, or you know you're not. If you know, for instance, walking into this next season, as I believe I stand right now, that you're more of a fringe playoff team, then you don't make moves for contending today if that's who you are. But that's been a bit of the problem with this, is that you misidentify yourself, you make moves then for today to rob for tomorrow, and then you were wrong about today. And then tomorrow is also harmed at the same point in time. That's a bit why I harp on this so much. If it doesn't just do the damage to today, it does the damage to tomorrow too. And that's where course correcting is in order, in my opinion. Carmen says, great insights. Thank you. I appreciate that, Carmen. And thank you for appreciate all the donations today too, you guys. You're very kind. Can for me, hit that like button if you haven't already. Maybe sub up if you get a chance. We're on the road here to 20,000. Trying to get there this offseason if we can. Black Thought, Brown Dreams, we can win with Geno. Just protect him. Now, I agree. The best version of Geno you got, Black, was in those first 10 games he started, in that first initial season of these 3 that he started. You actually had good O-line play, you had a good run game, and you had Geno Smith through those first 10 games playing like an MVP. Providing that kind of offensive line again, I do agree with you. You can see that same kind of performance come back and rise back up. Chris says maybe Amos, Morrison, or Porter for later cornerback picks in the draft. I think with a couple of those guys are going to higher than you think on that a little bit, maybe. As you can see on my horizontal board here, I have Morrison as my third highest graded cornerback. There is some question with him on injuries that could allow him to drop into second round, but he's not going to get past the second round. Trey Amos is also a guy that I have in the second round. Darian Porter's a little bit more interesting. He's more of a fifth roundish guy, I think, Chris. So he's more along in that area of things. But those other two guys are going to be taken a little bit higher. Roland says, will the Jets trade Sauce Gardner? They may be rebuilding. Jets are in an interesting position right now. Hard to say what they're going to exactly do. They might be rebuilding. They might try to go and target a vet quarterback and still put the pedal down. Hard to say on that. They do have to decide with Gardner here now after this third year if they want to pay him that money. And he can come back to being like Defensive Rookie of the Year. I've started all these games. Pay me that money. And they probably don't want to pay him $20 million a year. So don't know what you'd get from him in return. Maybe you could get a late first, maybe a second, especially that team has to pay him $20 million on the other side of it. But the Jets haven't really shown their hand yet on what their intention is going to be. They certainly haven't shown yet, Roland, that the intention is going to be to tear it down to the studs a little bit. I know that looks like what they should do, but never underestimate the stupidity of the New York Jets and their own ability to misidentify themselves and where they at and where they stand. Not just a Seattle problem. King Bomber, what would you break if Ashton Genty is the pick at 18? I'd probably just maniacally laugh. It would just make me maniacally laugh, King Bomber. I'd be like, oh my God. I'd just be so blown away. We're just like, okay. He's a good player. He'll be a lot of fun. I'll say that. Can't undersell that part of it. But holy hell, man. That would not be very exciting. Kickup, would you trade pick 18 with the Bears for 39, 41, and a 2026 third? Pretty good on the value, Kickup. It's good on the value when I got to think about it and I can't give you an auto answer and I got to 39 is a far drop, but you are picking up the third the next year. The Bears pick's likely to be a high third rounder the next year. Still in the first 12 picks of the second round. I'm going to go yes, Kickup. I go yes. Great scenario presented on your part. That was a toughie. Thomas, did you trade bait that had a first? Did you see the trade bait that had a first in DK for Myles Garrett? I might have. It makes no sense though. It makes sense. John's not going to shuttle DK off to Cleveland. He wouldn't do DK dirty like that. DK is going to have to start pulling some AB moves to get to that place of things. Yeah, King Bomber. Chiefs were able to do the turnaround with the, put the assets into it and you get the turnaround. CD Woods, what can we get for Woolen? If we can sell him to a team that gives us all-pro bag due to his coverage skills, then I would take that, but I don't want to trade him just because. I understand that. I get it totally. Again, on this, I'm not in a passionate point of saying they have to move him. It's just a prediction thing that I did on the perspective for this offseason as they approach what I expect the Hawks to do. So I could be wrong on this. I'm certainly wrong on a good many things. But I do feel I feel a little bit of my gut on an instinct on this one that I think that the team's going to look to make a move there. Could be wrong. Just a sense I get. AI says Mike Green has elite moves. He does. And twitched up arms are just violent knives coming down at you from every angle. He's a lot of fun. Boy, is it risky though with that guy too, because you're like, the size, arm length's a little shorter, but he's a lot of fun. Maxwell Hawksnest, what are we thinking about Dart? I like Dart. I don't like the thought about him being taken in the first round. I don't like that. I'm not a fan of that. That would not. I hope we don't do that. But he's a good player. Got a good, fairly live arm. It's not next level, but it's fairly lively. Good mobility, good decision making, tough as nails. Thomas, I had a mock draft that had Malachi Starks, Grant, and Howard with the first 3 picks. That'd be a hell of a first draft. You can come out with those first 3 picks. That'd be an amazing draft, Thomas. Amazing draft. All right, so Thomas, you're saying that Damian Lewis was mid last year for the Carolina Panthers. I think I would probably press back on you on that one a bit. I don't think that he was just mid for them. I'm not saying that he was an all-pro by any measure. And look, I'm not trying to take just merely the PFF grades away from this one and saying that this is where you need to take the PFF grades as the end-all be-all. I'm not. But everything that I'd heard from the Carolina Panthers is that, and their fans, is that they've been very happy with the addition of Damian Lewis. I also get to see a quarterback there that they took last year who was, almost into a shell of himself after last year and the way he was playing, comes back and has this line now rebuilt and repaired and plays really well. But at least according to PFF on this King Bomber, he was the 12th highest rated guard in the entire sport last year. Damian Lewis had his best season as a pro with the Carolina Panthers last year. He's never had this high of a grade in his entire career. So, I mean, I don't know. I think that that's kind of a success for them. I don't think the Panthers are looking at themselves today going, man, we shouldn't have signed Damian Lewis. That was a failure for us. That was a bad move for us. That didn't work out. Right here. Boom. I mean, the guys on this list too, it's, PFF's not worth much. It's like, we all would probably agree. Chris Listham's a pretty good guard. Quinn Miner's a pretty good guard. Quinn Nelson's a pretty good guard. Joe Thuney's a pretty good guard. Landon Dickerson's a pretty good guard. Elijah Vera Tucker's a pretty good guard. Kevin Dodson's a pretty good guard, right? The rest of the list makes a lot of sense around this. Thomas says, I heard a lot of rumors. Seattle did a lot of homework on Jackson Dart. I could see him sitting with Geno and learning from him. I could too, Thomas. And I heard those same rumors. I just get worried that those rumors are meaning first round Jackson Dart. I hope not. Warchi says, B, sorry, last post was crazy. What I was trying to say was T-Mac's father, Ikea, was a 6'7" middle linebacker and one of the best players Hawaii's ever produced. If he's anything like his dad, watch out. Let's go. Well, I'm very high on him, War Chief, legitimately so. He's a good player. House says, can CJ Pro Size play left guard? He can, House, but availability is the question. That's the problem there on that one. Hell of an inside guard. Great leverage guy. Tiger Town, the Foreign Nations tournament isn't trash, though. Foreign Nations tournament? Oh, for the All-Star tournament? Brian says Pro Bowl was pretty great when they played a real game. Yeah. I always got nervous when our guys were playing in it. Like, don't get injured, don't get injured, don't get injured. Don't get injured. King Power if they pick Genty, man, fire Schneider. He raised it above there, King, and it's not out of bounds either, right? Like, you could definitely go, yes, I could see John doing it. Where he's just like, he's a blue chip guy. We took the value of our board. We only have one more year of club control with Walker, so I mean, we feel like we got to get ahead of this one. Post Eminescence, how you doing, man? Good to see you in the house. Tommy Central. Hey, Brando, sorry I'm late to the party. I was watching Tom Grossi's $1 million donation stream. Well, hell yeah. Let's go, Tom. Everybody go check out Tom's charity stream. Awesome he's doing that. Picked a hell of a time to go live today, I guess, huh? Thomas says, shoot, I would understand Genty pick. I won't defend it, but if they go through free agency, then use BPA for the draft. I would get it. It would make me laugh, but I would get it to a degree too, Thomas, but it would make me just probably go, I probably might short circuit for a few minutes. King says, theoretically, if Dahlman and Smith re-signed, what would you want Seattle to do in free agency? Target Tevin Jenkins and Ryan Kelly, King. Target Micah Becton. Maybe there's just, no trade out there to be had and there's no move out there to be had on that. And if that's the way it is, then so be it. If those doors they've beaten down and the doors get closed in their face for reasons outside their control, like a Smith re-signing or like a Dahlman coming back and those other guys get pulled off the board too, then I can understand that. But of course, when you have your GM saying, he's just flat not even going to knock on the door, well, that's where it's less understandable from my perspective of it. Cool says, I don't know S about college players, so draft season's always overload for me. It's a lot, man. It's a lot. Every year I got to do the 300 and about 30 prospects, and I'm getting better at it now. We're getting out ahead of it and starting to look at them sooner and sooner, so it's less of an arduous process when you're trying to grind out 5 or 6 guys a day at times, as I did down back once before. Thomas says, I saw another draft where DK went to the Commanders for him and a third, and Seattle got a 2025 first rounder. It's about right value, Thomas. That's about what you'd get back in return. It's fair. He says taking K9 over Jurgens is what bothers me most. Probably a Carroll pick, but still. I mean, maybe. Well, maybe we'll come to learn John loves him running backs, man. He's got a running back fascination fever. Running back fascination fever. Are you sick enough? No. I need more running backs now. Hit that bell, please. He says, that's fair, Brandon, but I don't know if you can, if you sign him based on what you knew about him. He's had up and down years since being drafted. I think you're talking about, I think you're talking about Damian Lewis. And yeah, he hasn't necessarily always been super highly consistent. I think some of that, though, comes back to King are changing positions with him. You know, he came in, had a great rookie year as a right guard, and then we decided to move him to left guard. And I think that kind of reset a bit of the learning curve for Damian. But yeah, it's not always been up at this level, and it was a career best season. You know, hard to anticipate that. Thomas says the Lewis in Carolina is because Canales is a good coach. He knows weaknesses and strengths. I believe that could be the case with Kubiak and Benton. It's a fair point. And I hope he brings that, level to it. I will say to your point that on Thomas, if that had been the case, though, then there's less of a need for Carolina to supply him these 2 high-paid guards, 2 of the highest-paid guards in the sport, because you're thinking with Canales, he's going to be able to coach him up, right? So why give him those guys, right? Kind of runs counter to that a bit of, if he is that guy, then you don't have as much of that need to supply him those grade A starters out there, because he will get more out of it, which isn't necessarily the direction they went. But I think, Canales does a good job around that. I don't think I don't want to take the legs out from under your argument. I do think that he does provide and help that, and did that in Tampa Bay too. But Canales also had in Tampa Bay too, Thomas, really good offensive line. That's kind of the common denominator there between the two, is he had good, talented offensive line. He may be a good coach in addition to that, but those guys were also really good and talented and had a lot put into them. King Bomber said the one time John trades up in the first, he goes for Genty. I'm blaming you if that happens. What would be the first thing that I would do if I was commissioner? I would streamline the rule book. I would stop the softening of the sport. I would stop finding players big money for just normal football hits. I would allow coaches and teams to challenge both flags and plays. I'd be a hell of a commissioner. Good question, JSD. Carmen says, do you think the Seahawks draft a quarterback with the 2025 draft or hold out for next season? I really do think they're going to come out of this draft with a quarterback, Carmen. But I think the heart of your question is do they, if I may expand upon what I think you're asking, which is that do I think that they're going to target a guy high in the draft, the true quarterback of the future? I'm not as certain that they're going to look to do that. I think they're going to more look to take the 3rd, 4th, 5th round flyer guy who may give you something, who may have some ability there, but I don't know that they're going to draft the guy high necessarily. That's going to be that guy, which just as much if they draft that guy this year, then means, Carmen, they could come right back around next year to drafting another guy and then go and truly get their quarterback of the future next year. So I do think you come away with a quarterback here, but I don't know that it's necessarily your QBOY. Quarterback of the future. Team Bomber, how much do you think Mekhi Becton gets? Because without Trey Dahlman, everyone seems to be injury prone coming off an injury or is in the last legs of their career. I think that he probably is going to get about a 3-year, $30 million deal, something like that. Let me see where I had Sports Track out with him. I had looked it up when I did that show a couple weeks ago, and I'm spacing right now a little bit what it was. Let me bring it up. So according to Sports Track, 3-year, $33 million deal is about what it would take for him. Something like that. Bomber says, I wouldn't feel great about giving Tevin Jenkins a 3 to 4 year deal. Bears are letting him walk, and they have just as bad a line as us. Been a good player. Injuries are a little bit of a concern there, but that is true. Hawkseye says, we could have had Jalen Hurts instead of Darrell Taylor. Ouch. Yeah, but you would have pissed Russ off if you took Jalen Hurts. And you were worried at that time about rankling Russ. You didn't want to rankle the Russ. Thomas says, I did multiple drafts with a knowledgeable Seattle. We'll sign a center, but because of the O-line and D-line, double dip 2 D linemen and O linemen each. My hope is Benton will develop the O-line and AD on defense. Solid approach, Thomas. And definitely where I think the team's leaning towards going right now. Chris says, can't run if we can't block. If John Schneider forced a Genti pick, he'd need an intervention. John, you got to stop. What? I'm down to 4 beers a day. What? This ain't about the drinking, John. It's not about the drinking. It's about your running back obsession. What obsession? You need a good running back to make the offense work. Everyone knows that. A good running game means everything. Yeah, John, but a good running game is built on multiple parts, isn't it? What are you talking about? I got the coach in place. I'm talking about the coaching, John. What? John, what? John, what? You need to get offensive linemen, man. No, we need another running back. Stop saying that. Stop saying it. It's not the truth, man. It's not. Why are you guys trying to hold me down? King Bomber signed Dahlman to a 4-year, $50 million deal at the end of the day. Shanahan signed Alex Mack when he went to San Francisco, the first chance he got. Bingo. And Dahlman was the move that I foresaw them looking to make, King. I think that's the one where that's a guy I could see them absolutely targeting. You hammer him, you can move back now Haynes into more of a guard, that right guard role. Let Haynes, let Saamea, let Bradford duke it out, best man win. And then you go and you highlight probably the left guard in the draft with one of the tackle converts to guard or Tyler Booker. And that's not the worst of ways to go. Butta Smoka, full-time refs would be another part of what I do as a commish. I'd have a whole thing, man. I'd be walking in there day one, just overturning tables. I guarantee you guys will be liking what I'd be doing. Brian says defense will be round 1 IMO. Coach wants it. I get the same feeling, Brian. I get the same feeling, man. I don't know if John fights him too much on that one either, though. Brian, too, either. Cool Breeze says, breaking, John Schneider trades up, sending a 3rd and a 5th for Genti and a bottle of 12-year whiskey. It was the whiskey that was the hardest part of that for him to part with. Cool. Hand grenade, cool. We know B will be completely fair and unbiased to Hawks. No, you better believe it. We ain't going to lead the league in flags, I'll tell you that. Gibson, I'm ready to move off of Schneider if he still chooses to not address the offensive line. It's been since 2019. Since we've won a playoff game. He takes some of the blame. Yeah. It can't all just be thrown on Carroll's back with this, can it? And you looking at the back of his last 10 years is a part of the evaluation of John. Especially if there's something that's been a line of connection through that time period that we can, a similar failing that continues to fail. King says, really? I've heard Becton getting as much as 18 million APY. I'd be okay with giving him 10 to 11. He might get that. I mean, he's got that little bit of that Super Bowl glow going off of him, right, King? We've seen that in the past where that can allow these players that are kind of in that position to then pull in more than you would think that they would get. But Sports Track doesn't have him up as that high. He had a good season for them. He wasn't like a dominating top 5, guard in the sport. That same PFF ranking I showed you, he was like a 20th highest rated right guard. It is the right guard too, but look, these guys are starting to get paid, and I think the part that helps him out is that it's going to help out Dahlman, it's going to help out Trey Smith, and that these guys don't tend to get to the market. You tend to see much more of a just middling options as far as line help goes. Most free agent periods. Key with this too, King, is it's with the video I posted. If you didn't have a chance, do check it out. The one that I posted from yesterday in regards to double dipping, and the key on this is that getting caught up on the average per year stuff is definitely worthwhile as far as like considering. I'm not saying throw it out the door, but King Bomber, the real thing what this comes down to is that you can do it. It starts out with intention. What is the team's intention for 2025? To me, if you're going to be a contender, then you got to do some things to make yourself get to that spot, because you haven't been there in 10 years, and to think you're just going to magically get there through draft and development is a sucker's bet. So if you don't have to make this determination if you're a franchise to say, we do believe we are a contender in 2025. You could come back to us and tell all of us, look, we had the first year of evaluation with Mike McDonald. We see what we've got good. We see what we've got that's not as good that we need to correct and repair and fix to what he needs for a system. We're just getting this new offensive coach in. We've got to get the line rebuilt. Hey, we need you fans to be patient with this process a little bit. And the fans would be okay with that, I think, if they were just honest and open with that being their approach. And if the moves that then were succinct to that philosophy of approach fit to that, meaning that you weren't robbing for tomorrow for today if you're acknowledging that today you're not ready to contend. This is why this is such an important first part of this before we get to any of these other decision-making points like signing Geno Smith or DK Metcalf or making this trade there or going out in free agency and doing that. Where do you really see your team for 2025, John? Where truly are they at? Not where your pie in the sky hope would be. Not if you roll the dice and they come up 7, will they be? Where do you really see them being? Next year, we know Buffalo is going to be a contender. We know Philadelphia is going to be a contender. Detroit, even losing their coaches, is going to be a contender. The Baltimore Ravens will be back there and they will be contending. We can see some of the contenders already rising. I don't know that the Hawks are going to be ready to contend next year. But that's the first thing and the first important part of this, King, because if the decision is then, okay, we're a contender. We want to take the hard line steps we want to need to take in order for that to become the reality. So coming back to this, King Bomber, just want to show you these first two things. This was in the video yesterday that I showed also as well. But this is, again, just to present this a little bit on this. Let's look at these two contracts, two biggest contracts given out last year to offensive linemen. Creed Humphrey signs a 4-year, $76 million deal. So if you get stuck, King Bomber, on the average per year, this is where the team can kind of confuse us on this and be like, look, we didn't have $20 million per year to spend. Look, we didn't have $15 million year to spend with our cap situation. How could we do it? How could we do it? But look at this. Last year, Chiefs signed Creed Humphrey. First major contract that they're going to sign him to. Look at that first year cap hit that I highlighted. $5.1 million. First year hit. You got to put more in bonus. You got to you got to juice up the books in other ways. But that's a $76 million deal on a 4-year deal with a $5 million first year hit. Okay, well, let's go look at Robert Hunt. $20 million a year, right? Through the roof kind of cost for the Panthers, right? All right, Robert Hunt. Here we go. 2024. What was his cap hit? $20 million per year, right? $20 million per year. Can you see why I don't want to get caught up on average per year? Creed Humphrey and Robert Hunt combined first year cost in 2024 was about $11 million. They can do these deals if they want to do these deals. They are not restricted, and what the cost would be on this would be really almost irrelevant in that respect, especially considering that if it's then the worry becomes about burying money in the future, well, look at our future. We have top 4 amount of cap space just behind the Bengals in 2026 with $165 million to spend. And then in 2027, we have the third most amount of cap space with almost $276 million to spend. So you can absolutely push some money down the line without it hurting you in the least, especially if it's taking care of one of these issues that have been such big issues like the offensive line has been. Good. King says, what's clear to me is out of the 100 times Kubiak was asked about the O-line, the first thing he mentioned was free agency. That was a good point from Kubiak, that's for sure. Thomas says, a successful free agency isn't always signed the best guard. I think an elite center is more important. I'm okay with either one, Thomas. I am. I'll go with either one. I ain't picky. Give me one. Hand Grenade B, do you got a lineup prepared for the draft or still a work in progress? What do you mean by lineup? Do you mean my horizontal board? Do you mean the horizontal board, Hand Grenade? I was showing I showed the horizontal board there. Brian says our 3 center options could potentially be coached up to work well in the new system. May not target a free agent. True. It's very possible. In fact, I'd say probably likely that they don't. Thomas says, that's my worry about Dahlman. We'll have competition. What about the Saints cutting McCoy? Well, we do know the Saints are always in a bit of a predicament as far as their cap, and they are currently at $54 million, which is the least amount of space in the entire NFL. Unfortunately, there's a $16 million dead money hit to let go of Eric McCoy. If they did the post-June 1st cut, they could save like $10 million if they wanted to split it up into 2 years. But I think it's going to be hard with how much dead money he's clearing, with how good a player he is there, for them to be willing to do that. Jeffrey Thistle, thank you for the $5 donation, Jeffrey. I'm sorry, but it's time for a Seattle offensive line blooper video, complete with pancakes and 12-foot tall snaps. Was so bad last year, I was laughing. Yeah, that's part of why I'm harping on those lines so hard with it. Is I think, Jeffrey, I came away with it from the same feeling as you on this. Give me 1 sec here, folks. Be right back. Yeah, it was comically bad last year, the offensive line, and it's not the first year in this 10-year period, in my opinion, of it being substandard that it's been in that state. And it's why I hammer this, because I think it just holds down the rest of the operation. Your receivers can't be as good. DK can't be as prolific. Your quarterback is getting hit and stressed and injured and unable to operate the offense. You can't run the ball. You can't create any holes. Too much penetration across the board. It really keeps anything from progressing at this point. It's to me why it's got to be the main issue at hand here for this team and what they do to address it. And that it's got to be hit hard. It's got to be made a priority and can't be, the fifth rung of items that you want to address and deal with this offseason, in my opinion, Jeffrey, or it's not going to get corrected. Maybe I'll have to put that video together if I can stomach it, man. I don't know. I already had to watch that enough of that all with the all 22 rewatches of that line play. It is just as bad on the all 22 as it is watching live. We're just going, what is he doing? Kings has got to set an identity, got to stick to it to win. Can't be like last year where you got 4 types of O-linemen and expect to be a good team. True. Val Ramos, Brandon, would you sign Khalil Mack from the Chargers? I wouldn't here, Val. I don't think that we're the right landing spot for him. I think a team more like the Green Bay Packers would make a lot more sense, or the Detroit Lions would make a lot more sense for him. That feels a little bit like a better fit. He's getting a little bit older there for us. I don't even know if that, it'd be maybe a little bit of an upgrade over what you guys did with Leonard Floyd last year, but I don't even know if that'd be a great move for you guys to make. I think he had a good year last year. He's still been a very productive player. He might have a little bit more gas left in the tank. But I always get worried about guys at that age a little bit, especially if you're having to rely on them a lot versus just letting them be a rotational guy. King says, it's not that I wouldn't be willing to give an $18 million per year APY. I just wouldn't want to give it to Micah Becton, a one-year wonder who played with the Eagles line. That's fair. Definitely don't have the multiple years of productivity with him in that system. Jordan says, I get the feeling that John does listen to his coaches on what they need. I will have a wait and see approach, but if Mike and the OC wanted a specific player in free agency, I would imagine John will get him. Pete wanted Adams, and he gave up 2 firsts for him. True, Jordan. I would hope so. If the coaches are in John's ear and they are requesting that, I hope he would listen to them on this. And I would think so. You're right. I would think so logically. We will come to see. Thomas Brando. We also have the JSN Spoon, Cross, Mafe, Hall contracts, but not signing the good quarterback to $50 million. Not signing the not good quarterback. Just hope Gino's deal is okay, but not outrageous. I do as well. Part of why I say it's important to make sure you're aware of where you are as a team and signing these deals to be sure of it, because you are going to sign your 2 biggest contracts this offseason with Geno Smith and DK Metcalf, and those are 2 deals that are about today, about the here and now. Those aren't deals that are about the future. Those are about we think we can win right now. And as I said with this, I would have been okay with taking the patient approach and taking the step back. In fact, that was the approach that I was advocating for here. Part of the reasons that you have those contracts coming up, and you're kind of not quite sure. But the team's definitely not looking like they're going to take that same kind of approach here. King says it screams Draymond Jones ask if we give a $100 million deal to Becton, coming off a good year surrounded by good players, and then take a huge dip when he has to be the guy to carry the group. It might be. I think he found a good home there at guard versus tackle. I think, playing with the Jets is an organization where there's been a lot of players left the Jets that have gone on to be pretty good players. It would be a risk involved in doing this. I don't think there's any moves that are absent a little bit of risk out there. And when you make them, I think he'll be a good player in this league. I don't think that he was just merely helped up by the Eagles system and the players around him. I think that he went out and had a really good year. But I'll give you, it was just a 1-year production. That's true. Carmen says it's being reported that Dahlman wants to remain with Atlanta. Well, that very well might happen. Very well might happen. And these guys do rarely get to the free agent market. But usually they would have had a deal done with him by this point in time, too. Yeah, Atlanta is currently got the 1, 2, 3, 4. They got the 5th least amount of cap space as the Falcons right now. So they've got negative $11 million on their books as it currently stands, which may provide some issues in getting Dahlman done. Thomas says, wouldn't the main problem with Seattle be continuity? We have been through 3 OCs in 5 years. That how many O-line coaches and how many O-linemen that have played each other? I think it's a bit of a combination to me, Thomas. I certainly wouldn't undersell the fact that when you move through that many offensive coordinators, that it's going to be hard to find consistency with that many different approaches applied. But I think that you could have also applied that, Thomas, to the quarterback position, to the quarterbacks, and to the receiver position. And, I think it's true to a degree, but I think that this is that point we get to where sometimes there's the thing that's presented to me of, is it this or is it that? And I look at it and I go, both. I think that, if anything, part of what's happening here as far as a kind of a continuum here is that you're sort of blaming it on these OCs. You're blaming it on these offensive line coaches. They're taking the brunt of this blame. Maybe rightfully so. Maybe they're just that bad at their job. Maybe they do suck. But it also means that every time you're saying it's merely that, and it's not us over here, it's not me as a general manager and the players I'm picking, it's not me and my approach as a general manager and the lack of money that I'm willing to spend on this position, that, it's both of those parts. You look at it here and it's, you don't spend money on your offensive line. You almost utterly refuse to do so at times. And it's both of these to me. It ain't just going, well, it's just merely on these coaches. I think that's where we drive that thing I talk about times of when we get too simple on our excuses for things being good or great or bad or horrible. Football is not a simple sport, and there's a lot of reasons for things not working or working. And when it comes to this line, I think that's also very much the case. But a big part of it is John's inability to properly put onus on how much the line matters and put the resources into it to make it as good a unit as it is. When there's a dearth of options out there like John talks about, and then you short sell the position, it doesn't mean then likely you've built a great offensive line. It means you're just trying to kind of get by on that line. You're already walking into it with a sort of like, I don't want to pay for that, so let's just kind of get by on it. And then you get the results that you pay for. You get the results that you put the investment in. And that's a big part of this puzzle to me that look, coaches is fine to put some of the blame to that, but John's got to get some of this too. It's been too long standing of an issue to just merely put it on the coaches. Thomas says, I get the feeling Schneider will try sign a center, but they will be franchised or signed early. I think Seattle needs to copy the Packers level. Probably the way it goes. I agree with you there. Thomas heading out. Have a good night, man. We're going to probably put a wrap up on this one as well, as I just want to get a kind of an in-out show today. Smiglemole, thank you for subscribing. Smiglemole. Hopefully I said your name right there. Appreciate you joining up on the Hawks Nest. Kevin, thank you for reminding that. Please do, guys, if you can, as we're wrapping up today, hit that like button. I'd really appreciate it. I love the conversation today, whether we agree or disagree. I really love everyone's perspective on this. So thank you guys for being as active today as ever on the chat and turning this kind of item over and discussing this. I know that like some of this out there is some disagreement, but man, always respectful here in the chat. Really, really always do appreciate that too, in addition. Freedom Joe says, I just want the Hawks to sign a guy who does flips and scores a la Derek Fenner. Make it so. Chris, Hawks Nest, if you go interior offensive line first or second, trade up if you have to for Tyler Booker or trade up in the second to get Wyatt Milliam. I would look for Booker over Milliam myself, Chris. I like him a little bit more. Williams is a very interesting talent, though. He is. But I'd be okay with that approach. I wouldn't want to trade up for Booker. You could take Booker, I think, at 18. He'd just naturally be there. I don't think he'll be there in where we're picking in the second round. William probably would be there in the second round. So if you want to trade up in the second to target those guys because you don't think they're going to last to your 4 pick and you really believe in them to be a day one starter, I'd be okay with them taking that approach. I think both those guys will be pretty good pros in this league. Brian says 3 years for $105 million with a third year as a team option for Geno. I'd be okay with that. Geno's people are definitely going to try to push for more, but I'd be all right with that. I think 38 is where he's going to be. Right around 38 million per average. Maybe some incentives in there as well. Bo Eklo, I think for sure for sure hurt the home field advantage. I think it for sure hurt the home field advantage when they made the milquetoast statements about Geno last year. Oh, sorry. Coaching staff getting out in front of it with endorsements this year, not like last year. I think it hurt the home field advantage when they made the milquetoast statements about Geno last year. Could be. Definitely backing him up right now. That's for sure. I think the fan base is looking, I think, for a reason to kind of get caught back into the fray, and I think there's a little bit of a struggle for the excitement around this football team right now from the fan base in general. Kind of just need a little bit of an electricity shot fired through the 12s a bit here. Clippers says 40's tough for me, not gonna lie. I get it. The whole contract's tough, DD27, I like Booker's tape a lot. Worth the number 18. I do too, DB. He's my favorite left guard in this draft. And I think that he's a day one plug-and-play starter. I think he's a high-floor guy. Maybe not got a monster ceiling, but he'll be a very good player in this league. And hard to get mad at that at 18. I think he's a very clean prospect. Very clean prospect, man. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll put a button on that one at this point. I thank you guys for all the donations again on the channel here. Jeffrey, Varman, thank you for the multiple donations. Randall McDaniel, Jeffrey again, Cool Breeze, Carmen, Chad Hart, God's Gang, Feed Me, Holy's Hand Grenade, Jordan. Appreciate you guys for all the donations and support today. Very, very kind of you. As I said earlier too, if you guys can hit that like button, please do me that favor and smack that like button. As well as just a reminder, a couple of things I'll be streaming in a couple of other areas, not streaming, but you can catch me in a couple of different other areas. We've got Hawks Nest Clips channels up and running right now. So it's a little separate channel of this. I do some clips from these live stream shows, just kind of post over there. Little extra clips I'll post up over there as well. Just kind of stuff that's maybe not meant for the main channel. I just want to kind of get out in general. I'll be over on probably the Seahawks Nest on Twitch tonight, doing some streaming over on that side of it, get some food. I'm going to go over there and do a little bit of gaming. So if you want to pick up some of this conversation over there and do some more talking regarding the Hawks team, you can catch me over there and we'll do some discussing over on that side of it. I really appreciate you guys watching today. I do. We'll get another mock going on maybe the next stream there, Brian. Next stream we'll come back. We'll do a mock 2.0 maybe. See what we can do on that. Get that going back. Hawks Nest Clips, let's go. Yes, sir. A lot of people weren't as much on those 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 hour streams like we do, and said, okay, let's get a channel created for those folks that just like the shorter content, nice and easily digestible. And that's where you can catch that over there. I think we've got well over like 300 videos over there right now. I've been building up over this last year. So a lot of content over there, and I'm going to keep trying to get a couple of videos over there that week. And long term, we'll have all of these live stream shows clipped up over there once I can especially eventually get some help on with the channel on that. That's a long-term thing that we're trying to do. Long-term. Brian says, you'll not see me for 3 weeks. I'm headed on a trip to South America. We'll have a great trip to South America. You're going into an awesome time of the year, man. Getting out of that winter weather. And we'll see you back on the other side of it, Brian. Picking right back up right around free agency period, Brian. So it'll be getting very, very interesting at that point. Chad Hart, thank you for the $5 donation. Finishing it off real nice and right. I appreciate that support, brother. He says, go Hawks. In 2027, are Hawks going to Vegas? So we might need some AK-47s and some shot of some Gons 12 gauge. Some guns at 12 gauge. Well, indeed, yes, we're going back to Vegas, and you got to be careful with your players going out to Vegas. Wild things happen out there, What happens in Vegas may stay in Vegas unless it's too wild, and then everyone hears about it. So Hawks in Vegas in 2027, huh? Okay. That's a ways out. We're not playing the AFC West till 2027? Is that right? We were playing them inside that time frame, but my timing might be off on that a little bit. But go Hawks, Chad. Thank you for the $5. And be careful if you go to Vegas, folks. Head on a swivel. Be careful. Smigmole, thank you for subscribing up. I appreciate you doing that, man. We're on the road here trying to get to 20,000. You're helping us get there a little bit closer on subbing on up. So thank you for doing that. I really, really, really appreciate you. Brian, you take care. Be safe down there in South America. Don't do nothing too crazy. Stay away from that ayahuasca, man. Okay? Don't talk to the clockwork elves. They'll send you on the wrong path, man. I'm telling you. Duran says, John Schneider starting to get on my nerves. Well, it wasn't a lot of easy talk today, and I wish I could have given an interview and we were just able to be very real effusive and say, hey, John's getting it. The light bulb's coming on. But instead, Duran, you came off the other side of this press conference and it was on the other side of that, where it more felt like he was doubling back down to old habits. And like the Rolling Stones once said, old habits die hard. And that seems to be the case here with John when it comes to this offensive line. Maybe that's a smokescreen. Maybe this is just some cloak and dagger stuff he's pulling here. But your frustrations are my frustrations with this. I'm really tired of seeing this be the blind spot that the team just utterly at times refuses to address. I hope it changes this offseason. And if it doesn't change this offseason, it's going to be hard to drum up a lot of confidence that the development will suddenly now kick in when it has not kicked in so much, very much recently. Yes, new coaching staff. Yes, new offensive coordinator to help make that happen. But you're asking them to solve a lot of long-standing issues just unto themselves. And I think that's a lot to require from a new coaching staff already just trying to come in to get their system acclimated and brought up to speed, especially, again, as you're a team that's trying to show your fans that you are going to be a contender in 2025. So I get it, Duran. Same kind of place that I find myself in on that as well. King says we're playing AFC West in 2026. Okay, there we go. I thought so. Like, yeah, we're coming back around next year after. I was like, no, it's back over on the other side. Brian says, take care, Brian, says Brian E. Watch out for the Venezuelan gang members. That's right. Tero Año or something. Smigmol. So if Dahlman is the target in free agency, who is our comp? Who's the comparison to Dahlman? I probably kind of similar to a guy, always hard to do the center comps a little bit to me. He's quick off the line of scrimmage, real tenacious. He can do a lot of the movement stuff you look for from the position. Would be my comp for Dahlman. I mean, McCoy, the Saints center out there that Kubiak just had, it wouldn't be probably too far off. Yeah, 164, 300, another 163, 300. Both pretty quick off the line of scrimmage, quick with their hands. Both can move pretty fluidly in space. They can pull. McCoy might be as good a comp out there. He's not a Humphrey. Humphrey was like, a little bit more restricted in his movement. He just got the job done when he asked him to move in space. More of a, wrestler inside there, Let him get in there and mix it up. These guys got a little bit more of maybe quasi finesse a bit to the game at times. They're tough too, though. They give you the both sides of it. Smigamo, I meant competing for his services. Oh, I'm sorry, Smigamo. Well, you're going to have probably the Bears at a bit of the forefront looking at that. They would be the first team off. I think the Raiders would not be. They got JPJ down there. I would say probably could be looking at Titans. I could see potentially the Bears. Wouldn't surprise me if 49ers got potentially in the mix on this one. Tennessee Titans. Wouldn't be a huge list, I'll say that. There's a lot of teams that are kind of set at center. The Bills are set at center. The Jets are cool at center. Ravens, Steelers just got their guy Frazier last year. Bengals aren't going to spend. Browns are fine. Texans got their guy. Colts are losing Ryan Kelly. They could come into this. But I don't think the list would be expansive on that. Very well. Chris's Chicago turns out yet. I don't know if Chicago turns it around yet. Jury's still on Johnson. Jury's big time out on Johnson. I don't know on that one. We'll see. And Motive, I agree, man. We need to see the upgrades in the offensive line first. Hopefully we find that one way or the other here. This team desperately does need it. I really believe that in the bottom of my heart. Get this line right. Yeah. Cool Breeze, if we draft, spend right, we could do 12, 13, 14 wins. A lot has to happen out of a realm. I see it's 11, 12 wins. You can get there. Got to have a championship offseason, Cool Breeze. There's definitely work to be done. It's not just merely the seed growing to break the soil, and it's just a matter of time before it blooms. You got to do some more purposeful work from a Seahawks perspective to make this happen, but it's entirely possible, especially with next year's record or next year's schedule that's not looking tremendously daunting. It's definitely a feasible schedule to work around. Bo says that the offense is bang average and the D continues the trend from last year. 12 wins is doable. I also hope McDonald improves his situational coaching. There were some sketchy choices in game. Agreed, Bo, especially going forward on fourth down. Would like to see a little bit less aggression from Mike McDonald at times, especially when you're in a game where the defense might be driving a little bit more of the game and they're controlling things, and you can play a little bit more to defense and special teams. Especially if you have a running game working and all that, you know. King Bomber, Lloyd Cushenberry's contract's ugly, Brandon. Yeah, they just signed him, though. They're stuck with it on that one, King. Houston's a possibility, too. You're right. And Indy might be there with letting go Ryan Kelly. That may be the way that they pivot over to Dahlman off Kelly on that. You're definitely going to have to spend a lot of money to make it happen. Yeah. And Chris, I'd love to see the Bears successful again. It's hard when you don't have the greatest of ownership in place. That's a big inhibiting factor for them, is that's a bad Bear ownership. It's an ownership by committee, and it's hard. They don't have a lot of money. It's hard to get the job done when that's the case, but they're in as good a position as ever. Quarterback, coach in place, pretty good young roster, so they could pull this off. They certainly could. All right, folks. Well, we will be back over on Tuesday doing the roundtable show, I believe, over there this Tuesday. So you can check me out over there, the NFC West roundtable. We might be back here this Wednesday as well. Kind of be just a touch and go period here as we head in the off season a little bit. As just if there's anything news wise really percolating, I might not do a lot, but as stuff kind of pops up, if I've got items I want to discuss, we'll talk about it here on the channel and keep this going. I thank you guys for watching tonight. Please again do hit that like button if you could. Sub on up if you haven't already. I would really appreciate it. Thank you again to everybody who donated tonight on the chat. We will be, for members of the channel, getting a call-in show here in the next couple of days. So be on the lookout on your community post if you're a member of the channel, as I will get that link out to you. I'd love to chat with you guys on what you'd like to see from the direction of this team this offseason, the approach you think the team's going to go. Give me some predictions. Would love to see it. We will be back really soon. I will be over on Twitch in about an hour from now, so you can check me out over there if you're still up and around and want to hang out. And we will be back soon. But until next time, please don't you ever forget. Don't do it. Go Hawks.